Hello and welcome to the EXP Required podcast where we talk about Final Fantasy and other stuff. I am Jack and I am joined by Mol. How you doing, Mol?
Hello, not too bad, thank you. What about you? The
Oh, I'm
weather's cleared up this week, finally,
it
so
is
lots of
cleared up.
sun.
It is very sunny and I have a fan on for the first time in God knows how long. So
My
that's
God, the end times have come.
yeah, that's it. The world is ending and I can't because of sound, I can't open the window. And I think you're the same. So
Yep, that's exactly the same for me. There is a some guy chainsawing down a tree in the street. Thankfully, you can't hear it with my window closed, but the second it's opened, it's pandemonium in here.
such a inconsiderate chainsaw man, hey?
Right?
Then we
Right?
mentioned Chainsaw Man in the last episode, didn't we? Come back to haunt us.
Everything's full circle. Time is a flat loop.
He just, you invoked him. It's like Candyman. You mentioned his name and he appeared. Right. So, right, today we're going to talk about the three, and I know someone will be really finicky with us because there are more than three Final Fantasy films. I think there's five, technically. Is that right? So, the three we're going to talk about today are Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, and Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 16. I think it's the title, isn't it? It starts with Kingsglaive.
15. Ooh,
15. I said 16, didn't I? Right. It came out in 2016. That's why, because I always, I had it in my head that Final Fantasy 15 came out in 2015.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I've written down it's 2016. So that's why I've said 16 there, not because I was trying to talk about better products than Kingsglaive. Whoa, did I do what? Sorry, what? Yeah, and there are a couple more. I think there's one for the world of Final Fantasy or something. There's someone that's like a random anime film. And there's also Last Order.
Yeah,
Fantasy
Last
7.
Order's an OVA for Final Fantasy VII. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm pretty sure there is technically an OVA for Final Fantasy V out there. And then, of course, this doesn't even begin to get into all of the other medias like the Final Fantasy Unlimited anime.
Oh, you mentioned it.
And the Brotherhood anime, and there's so many just extra bits of media
Final
floating
Fantasy
around
Legend
out
of the
there.
Crystals. So if you
That's
want to
the
hear
one.
any discourse on that, then wait for another episode because I'm sure we'll get to it. Anyway, the three major theatrical releases, I think is fair to say. I think they were all
Feature
released
films.
theatrically. The feature films, yeah.
I
Were they?
believe only one of them was actually released theatrically, and that would be Spirits Within.
I know
The
that-
others was straight to DVD.
I know that the 7 one came out recently when Rebirth came out as a
Yes.
theatrical release, but it wasn't, as far as I know, it wasn't originally
No, not at all.
straight to
Not the
DVD, straight to
slightest.
UMD, don't you mean? For Final
It
Fantasy 7?
came out on
Sorry, I just wanted to
DVD
say
and
that.
UMD.
Yeah, UMD. Does anyone know what those are?
I recently sold one on eBay, if that helps. So
What's
at
UM
least one person out there still using them.
Which UMD did you sell? I'm intrigued.
That would be a second copy of Crisis Core that I no longer
Why did you have 2 copies of Crisis Core?
I bought one for myself back when it actually released originally, and then I think that year for Christmas it was given to me again as a present. And by that point, I'd already finished Crisis Core, and I was like, I've had this thing kicking around for like at least 15 years. It was time to let go of at least one of them.
Amy, you love so much, you had twice. It's not as bad as me having Rayman 2 in about 15 different versions, right?
Or all the different copies of the FF8 demo.
Yes, I do have all the copies of the there. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that's I've got more copies of that game than anyone else. Yeah, no, there are a few games like that, aren't there, that end up like coming on your shelf and staying there. Rayman 2 is one. Honestly, it creeps up on you because they were really sneaky with that because they released one called Rayman Revolution. And I thought it was a new game, and it ends up just being Rayman 2, but the Dreamcast version ported onto PS2, and it's the same bloody game, but like with slightly better graphics, and it's the same. For fuck's sake, fair enough. So I ended up like
Final Fantasy IV, honestly, with all of the different ports and remakes and remasters. I feel like I've bought that game probably about 20 different times since it's come out.
Pretty sure I'd be interested to count at some point how many versions of that I have because I'm sure I've got a few of it as well.
Too many.
Final Fantasy 2, as it's known to the Americans.
Oh god, yeah, that one trips me up. I have friends that are actually big fans of actual Final Fantasy 2, and it's like all 3 people and a ham sandwich in the fandom, and then here's Final Fantasy 4 just overtaking them at every corner.
Yes, Final Fantasy 6 was 3 as well, wasn't it?
That's
and
correct.
I remember back in the day, I do not condone emulators, but back in the day, there was no way to get Final Fantasy 3 in Europe at all before the DS port came out. You could get all of them released officially, and 3 was not available. So the only way to play it was to get an emulator, get a NES emulator or a Famicom emulator and do it. And there was a famous translation of it that came out, the fan translation, and it was an absolute fucking nightmare getting it because you type in Final Fantasy 3 and you put the emulator on and it would just boot up flipping Final Fantasy 6. And it was like, oh god. And it was like, I don't want to play that. I've got that. Just outrageous. Anyway, let's get off the subject of emulation. So let's start with Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, released in 2001, and we kind of like did the whole "what's your history of it" thing. But I think maybe I'll start kind of with that question. But what's your memory of the history of this coming out, as opposed to your personal "I love this film" type thing? If that makes sense.
Right, good question, actually. So I was on a walk with my dad recently, and I actually turned, like, no context for him whatsoever, but I was thinking about Spirits Within and all of the research that I was doing for this episode. I just turned around to him out of nowhere. I'm like, did we go to the cinema to watch Spirits Within? And he looked at me and was like, yeah, do you not remember? It was me and your mother and you, and we all sat down and watched it, and we came out of it not knowing what the hell had just happened. I was like, oh, no memory of this whatsoever. Thanks, Dad. Wicked. I love spending time with you and going to the cinema with you. Honestly, I don't really have very many, like, original memories, I suppose, of Spirits Within, just because it was so long ago. And in 2001 I would have been turning 9, I think, that year, so a fair time ago now. But I was always very surprised reading all of the different reviews and fan opinions online over the years of, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I think it's one of those things of, we kind of talked about this previously in regards to FF10-2 and FF8, actually, about how, like, opinions have shifted to be like, oh, it was worse than people originally thought of back in the day. I don't really think I remember Spirits Within as being that bad. But it was one of those, it's a movie. It was a day out and I enjoyed myself. I didn't really have any particular negative emotions. Part of that might have been the fact I was too young to really get what was going on or not going on, I suppose. And then maybe about 10 years ago, I was visiting one of my best friends in America for the first time. We decided to sit down together one evening and watch Spirits Within. And we got through the whole thing, and there was a moment of silence afterwards. I just remember turning to her and being like, that was nowhere as near as bad as I've been led to believe that it was. I actually really enjoyed myself this time around. And you know what? I had the same feeling this time as well.
Yes. So that brings us on nicely to my history with this movie. This was a big deal at the time. Like, it was massively, like, everywhere, like Blockbuster. I remember, like, seeing all the previews of Blockbuster Video. We used to get a Blockbuster Video on a Friday. A lot of people did as well. A lot of people have memories of going to Blockbuster and renting a movie. For people that don't know, that are maybe too young to remember, Blockbusters used to have CRT TVs set up around the place that were showing the same trailer around the shop. So wherever you are in the shop, you would always hear the trailer playing. And this was one that was, I remember Eminem Lose Yourself playing a lot because of 8 Mile. And this was one that was like a massive thing that was coming up at the time, because it was a huge deal that they would, I think it was the first fully length photorealistic CGI'd movie.
That's the claim that they've made anyway. Yeah, I couldn't find anything to really, like, counteract that at all.
And so it was a big deal. I remember as well. I mean, we'll dig more into it in a minute, but I think, like, my memories, like, I loved Final Fantasy 8 and 9 at the time, and I know on the back of the booklet for 9, the Europe version, there's a picture of the poster for this film, and it says soon in theaters. And I remember turning around to my mum and saying, oh, I want to go and see this. She was like, yeah, but it's in the theater. When it's in the theaters, it's a very American thing. It's in theaters. Like, no, that means the cinema, or the pictures, as we used to call it. That's probably very northern thing. That go to the pictures.
It was always the flicks in my family.
Go to the flicks. Go to the flicks and see Bug's Life and watch Flick in action in the flicks. So I don't know why I didn't go and see this at the cinema, because I was a Final Fantasy night. It probably was because 2001 was the year of every other film coming out. So we had Fellowship of the Ring, that one about a wizard. Harry Potter was the big one, and Recess School's Out was another movie, which I will mention again in a bit. I think Spy Kids 3D came out this year. Maybe I'm wrong there.
I can't believe you haven't already mentioned Shrek and Monsters Inc. They came out that year as well.
Yes, they did. That's probably another one.
Big animated feature film.
Didn't see Shrek at the cinema, but saw Monsters Inc. at the cinema. Funny enough, tangentially, I remember going to the cinema we made a big deal out of going to see Monsters Inc. because it was a really popular movie. It's probably been forgotten to time how popular that was. I remember, like, queuing up around the IMAX in Southampton, like what felt like a massive long queue at the time to go and see that film. But I remember, I think it was one of the other Disney or Pixar movies we went to see at the cinema. And obviously, before the film, they'd have the trailers come on, which is probably the best part of the film, usually.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Still is these days.
The teaser to Monsters Inc. came on. They come out of the closet, and the monsters came out of the closet and then walked into the room. There's, like, a really weird teaser online. I remember at the end of it, it was like coming 2001, and seeing that in the 90s was like, oh my god, that's so far away. Of course, it wasn't that far away. Yeah, it was only like 18 months away, but like that was like, oh my god, that's got like, because normally films, because of course animated films took that much longer to make, so they were a longer term. Well, they did back in the day, the good old days when animated films took longer to make and they were better. Yeah, so like, I don't know why I didn't go to see Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, no idea, but I remember renting it from Blockbusters on DVD, I believe, not VHS, and I was like, yeah,
ahead of the curve, all right.
Dad, you've got to get into it. Yeah, we had a dinosaur DVD player this time. I was like, Dad, you've got to watch this. You got to watch this. It's fantastic. It's Final Fantasy, and then put it on. And he was like, yeah. So like, it was my like it to me, like my only memory of it being bad, quote unquote, was that it didn't show what Final Fantasy was all about necessarily. You know, at the time, I think I may have touched 7 at this point a little bit, but there was only really 3 games that were like worth playing, and they were all different thematically. You know, we've talked about that in the first episode, that they weren't necessarily that different as games. You know, they all had different stories to tell. So this was just like probably in line with that. But of course, you know, it didn't.
Yeah, I find like in hindsight, it definitely fits the whole, well, it's trying something new and it doesn't relate to any of the other Final Fantasies whatsoever. It's interesting to think of, especially now with, you know, 23 years of hindsight. I know it's terrifying, isn't it? But thinking like, you know, they really did try, and we've had so many different kind of modern things since then within the Final Fantasy universe. And this just, for some reason, everyone really was expecting Final Fantasy 7, 8, or 9 on the silver screen. And then when we didn't get that, it was kind of like, this isn't Final Fantasy.
I think it's probably why they ended up making the Advent Children later on, because they were like, let's capitalize on Final Fantasy 7 and we can discuss whether that was a good thing or not in a bit. But yeah, no, I mean, I like, in hindsight, I think I agree with you. Like I watched it once back in the day when I rented it with my dad. I think I may have seen it again afterwards. I don't know. I think we rented the DVD, so I think I took it around a friend's house as well, and we watched it there, and like didn't mind it. Again, like at that time, I just wanted the sequels to the games I liked, you know, more than anything. And those were back in the days when, you know, it was very, very difficult to get sequels to things you were invested in. Nowadays, there's too many fucking sequels. Like,
oh god, yeah,
like I mean, like, oh, the Spider-Man or the rebooted Spider-Man. Now it's like, oh, just please, just have a break from flipping Spider-Man. Anyway, I mean, like, I watched this the other day, and you know what? I actually liked this movie. I wouldn't say it was an all-timer amazing thing. Like, it didn't really have the same resonance as the games did back in the day, because all those, we mentioned those 3 games, they really could be considered absolute masterpieces and classics when they came out, and they've held to the test of time. This, I think, you know, I can understand why it fell a bit flat with audiences. I think looking at it, go into it a bit more, having dug into a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff, there was stuff I read up on, you might know more about this than me, that Aki was going to become, the main character Aki, or I believe it was, the idea was that she was going to become like an actress that appeared in other movies.
Yes.
And I suspect, quite the same way that we have now with AI, everyone's worried about AI, a lot of actors were worried about that, I'd imagine. I don't know. I can't not put words in anyone's mouths, but I think maybe there was a bit of a Hollywood like, oh, we can't like this movie because it's like they're trying to replace this man. I don't know. That might have been it. I don't know.
You're 100% right, actually. I ended up looking at a whole bunch of interviews and like materials from before the film actually came out, all dated back to, you know, 2001, and I think the latest that I ended up looking was maybe from 2007, something like that, but it was still very much more recent then than it is now. There was a BBC article, brief interview with Tom Hanks of all people, where they were asking about, you know, how do you feel about the concept of digital actors, and I believe Tom Hanks's stance at the time, I don't know if this is something he's changed his mind on, was that he was worried about it, didn't really want it to happen because he was afraid that his digital likeness would be illegally used by what was the phrase that he used, like unscrupulous auteurs. That was it. Just a fantastic phrase, really, isn't it? But he something that I found really interesting is he kind of finished that little segment up with, I'm not sure what actors can do about it. And it was one of those things where I had to stop and be like, wow, this could be written in 2014. God, what time am I living in? This could be written in 2024, actually, because people are still genuinely worried. And especially over the last, I'll say 10 years or so, with the rise of, you know, I hesitate to use the words AI because it's not artificial intelligence at all. It's generative machine learning. Let's please all
large language models. Yeah.
Yes. But, you know, with the rise of generative AI and
deepfakes
and just your average Joe being able to use Blender and create whatever he wants in his bedroom, you know, it's a lot more prevalent now than it was 23 years ago. It was just absolutely fascinating to see where we started, and then be able to follow the through line up to where we are now and be like, oh, things are exactly kind of what we predicted that they might be, really. I don't know what's your stance on the fake people being real.
My position on all of it is that the we can get really deep into the ethics of AI, what people are calling AI, and I think that it's not. People are always going to seek out human interaction, no matter what. And like, for example, YouTube, we're talking on a podcast now, and people are interested in what other human beings experience and think. There's nuance to humanity. You find, I remember when I was younger, I used to find people that 100% agreed with my position on everything, and then you'd realize they'd disagree on one thing, and you'd go, when I was younger, I was like, oh no, and then I actually go, hang on, that's good, that's healthy, where that's probably a slightly tangential from the whole AI thing, but I think that the point is that listening and having some form of relationship with another human being, even if it is parasocial or it's some kind of whatever the other phrase would be for you're on the receiving end of their art and not necessarily having a direct input back to them, it can be painful. It's painful, not that sounds awful and pretentious, I guess, but there's an element of discomfort you get from that, and I think that people crave that. I think there's some people that don't want that discomfort, and I think that there's some sort of the AI might appeal to them, but I think people will always seek out new stuff. I mean, I think it was similar recently with I don't think it's tangential. I think it's the same thing, really. Events. Mm-hmm. Obviously, events have taken a real kick in since COVID, and this is a bit of a shame. Of course, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but presumably, a lot of events couldn't keep the money flowing when there was no events going on. It was probably very difficult for people. But I went to WASD WASD in London recently, and it was absolutely packed. People clearly want to go to events. So the stuff is driven by what humanity wants. It's not driven by what computers want. Yeah. That's my take on it. That's probably a very long-winded way of saying I'm concerned about artists being ripped off for their work in terms of you mentioned voice acting there and art that can AI that can then put loads of people's artwork into it and spit something out at the end. But I think the artists are so vocal in making that'll stop being a problem, because I look at stuff now and think, oh my god, is that AI? I'm not interested in it unless it's I think it can be okay sometimes when it's done for comedic stuff. You know what I mean? Depending.
For me personally, the bottom line is if it's something that all parties have consented to, there's no problem with it at all. Totally. Unfortunately, that ethical barrier was almost immediately broken. So my stance on AI has to be, is this ethically produced?
Yeah, totally.
From the get-go. And that puts a damper on it immediately, really.
Oh, no, I definitely agree with it. Yeah, I mean, I think the points I was making out there's an AI generated thing of parodying the presidents doing ranking stuff. Have you ever seen that? And I think when it's used to have a pop of power, I think that's when it's probably a little bit. I don't know. There's a debate in there, isn't there? I think, but
I mean, I think as humans as well, sometimes you can have a very moral stance on something, and then also sometimes go, that's funny, and forget the morals in a second.
Well, I think it's more to do with the fact that we can get into the deeps of it. A lot of that stuff you could do before AI anyway. It just would have been it's quicker to produce when it's AI. You could have sat there with clips of Joe Biden's voice, line by line by line. Now you can just put it into a program; it does it for you. So that I think
it's not back in the day we called them YouTube poops. Am I correct?
Yes, we did. So I don't think it's necessarily the ethics of it come into it there. I think it's more the fact that it's a lot quicker to do, so it becomes a problem. But anyway, this is definitely a subject we could dip into in stuff. But it's really interesting. I mean, and it's also interesting to see all these big names that are in this movie.
Yeah, it's a very, very star-studded cast, isn't it?
Right. So, I mean, I think you mentioned in a previous... It's interesting this, because when I was watching these, I was like, oh, I get what Mol meant now when I was watching this, because we were talking about the voice actors in Final Fantasy X, ha, 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 and how you preferred them to the Hollywood stuff. And I remember thinking... and you mentioned nowadays, and I was thinking of, and you've trapped me again. I was thinking of Final Fantasy 16 with Ben Starr and co. And I thought, well, they're really good, but no, I think you were referring to this stuff,
this kind of stuff, yeah.
So I think, and I don't want to be too mean to people in this movie, because I really like Ming-Na Wen, who plays Aki. She's fantastic as Mulan. She's fantastic in everything else I've seen her in. She's great in Stargate Universe. She also looks fantastic. She's if I looked that good at 60 odd, I would be very happy. Let's put it that way. But yeah, no, really good actress. I think she's a bit wooden in this movie.
I 100% agree with you. I watched a lot of behind the scenes and interview materials. I believe in her own words, she found it quite eerie to watch her voice come out of Aki until she became comfortable with it and was like, oh, I've kind of given birth to this new character with my voice. And wonderful. I'm really glad that she felt that way, at least at the time. I'd love to know what she feels now, almost 25 years later on the same role.
I was in what? I wasn't in that movie.
But actually watching the final product, it's very much, I was a big fan of Mulan as a kid. I know that she can do an absolutely fantastic job with just her voice. And watching this, it didn't feel like she hit that high note, so to speak. No. None of them did.
I think one person does, personally. That's just me.
Is it Steve Buscemi?
No, it's not Steve Buscemi. It's Donald Sutherland. I thought Donald Sutherland as Sid. I think looking at it from a lip flap perspective, because of course the real problem with this stuff is that the animation's done first and they've got to match what the Japanese voices are. So you get some awkward lines and stuff like that. But I think Donald Sutherland did really well with that. I think he's the only one. I think
he's definitely a star.
Yeah, like he incredible, like how he manages to keep it feeling natural throughout the movie. Like he was the one that stood out to me. I mean, Steve Buscemi, yeah, he's all right, but it was just Steve Buscemi, and out of all of them, I would say that the best performance in terms of what I mean by performance is how well he dealt with the limitations of the voice already been produced by the animation, is what I was coming from with Donald Sutherland there. And I like Donald Sutherland and everything, so honestly, I love Donald Sutherland. I think he's fantastic,
That's a really good point that you bring up, actually. I didn't see anything to indicate that Spirits Within was dubbed over or that the Japanese language was the original language. Is that true?
I felt that way as well. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure. Obviously, like in a lot of the games at the time, it was Japanese stuff first and then the dub comes over. I don't know how they rewrote the script or anything like that to get it to work. But
because I know that the way that they actually filmed was with live action mocap.
Oh, okay.
Actors. So all of the movements look natural because they are natural movements, so to speak. And there was it was very interesting watching the behind the scenes. I can link a couple of videos.
Yeah. How does it work then? How did they redo it for Japanese and English? Or?
So I know I don't know as far as specific languages, but I do know that it was only the bodily movements that they actually captured with mocap. I don't know if it was a case of technology wasn't that good yet, or if they just didn't their first feature film, they didn't think that far ahead.
Yeah.
But all of the movements of the hands and the expressions and the mouth movements, especially, that was all hand done. That wasn't actually motion captured at all. It's interesting knowing that the human touch of editing didn't quite make it real, I suppose, in comparison to all the actual movements. That is just a lot of the criticisms that I saw in reviews and then in a research paper, because I ended up finding a research paper on CGI feature films, and was that the eyes specifically, but also the mouths in CG just don't tend to look right. No. And that's where people find the most grievances, I suppose. Yeah. It looks wooden, it looks stiff, they just look fake.
You get a little bit of this here, but I just thought that out of all of them, Donald Sutherland's character felt the most like he was there.
Dr. Sid looks the best to me as well.
It's probably a lot to do with it as well. It's probably a lot to do with it as well. I mean, obviously we talked about the old man footage that was used for the PS2 tech demo. So maybe it was the one that was built on the most. I don't know. But I think I'm probably a little bit biased because I like Donald Sutherland as an actor. I think he's great. I mean, I've not seen all the Hunger Games movies, but I think he's only in those movies for 10 minutes.
His presence cannot be denied.
But,
he's a wonderful actor.
God, he's a fantastic actor. He's also in a film from the 60s called The Dirty Dozen. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but I didn't know he was in that.
He's in that. He's he's only 30 odd in that, and he's brilliant. He's an excellent actor. He really is. He turns everything into gold. So I would say, out of all of them, I was like, yeah, you did well there, Donald. The rest of them, though, I mean, I'm going to just slag Alec Baldwin off now. What is Alec Baldwin doing in this movie? Oh my God!
I'm going to be nice. I'm going to say his best. He's doing his best.
Okay, right. My opinion on this, right? I'm not going to slag Alec Baldwin off too much.
Too much.
But the character that he's playing, Grey, right? I've written a note here that he should have been called Beige, right? Not Grey, right? He looks like Ben Affleck. Why wasn't this Ben Affleck? Yeah. Literally, I've actually written here, Grey looks like the Ben Affleck smoking meme. It would have probably made more sense to be Ben Affleck. I don't know why.
My favorite comment that I saw on the characters within the Spirits Within was right in the first 10 minutes or so when they've been rescued out of the old city and they get onto the dropship and everyone starts taking off their helmets. There's one person going, "It's Chris Redfield." And that guy's Chris Redfield too. Every single movie in this person is Chris Redfield to me. That's just it. I don't need to know their actual names.
Yeah, I don't know their actual names. I know that I know Steve Buscemi because his voice is really distinctive. But I think I think we're probably agreeing here. I don't think these guys necessarily give bad performances. I just don't think they necessarily match the characters.
think Steve Buscemi is actually, for the role that he's been given, he does a really good job, in my opinion. I like Steve Buscemi as an actor. I think he's a fantastic guy.
I like Steve Buscemi as a human being. I mean, he's a volunteer firefighter, isn't he? I would love to I'd love to have a drink with Steve Buscemi. He's an absolute gentleman. I don't know. Again, I'm going to just say the character that there's a bit at the beginning of the movie, right, where they've rescued Aki from wherever the bloody hell she is. Oh yeah, it's old New York City, which made me laugh. Old New York City. Just cancels out. It's just York City, isn't it? They find her after she's found this pretty flower. And then, of course, there's the whole thing between her and Gray. They've clearly been a couple before in the past. But there's the scene where they like go through the decontamination bit. And there's a line where Steve Buscemi says to the lady character on the team, I don't know her name.
I think it's Jane. I'm not 100%
might be
on that
Jane.
one. But...
And she says, he goes, you've put on weight. And then at first it's like, wow. And then she comes straight back to him and says, it's called upper body strength, get a girlfriend. And it's like, whoa, what? Like,
God, it feels very reminiscent of Aliens, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, and to be fair, like actually, like, at first you think, wow, okay, that's a little bit sexist. This is 2001. Is this what it's going to be like? But she slapped him straight back. And I thought, that's actually pretty realistic in terms of, like, okay, these are clearly people that work together and take the piss out of each other's foibles. So it was all right. I was like, okay, I wasn't gonna be like, oh god, is this going to be loads of like derogatory comments? And again, actually, one thing worth mentioning as well. I've actually like made a joke in my notes saying, would this film be labeled woke today? Because like literally but because like it's a very diverse cast. It doesn't like make a big deal of it. It just is. It's like, okay, cool, you know, like I mean that ironically, like someone would go, this is really bad, there's a lady in it. Like, I don't like women in films, like one of those knobheads.
I think we should rename it to the Spirits Woke In.
The Spirits Woke In, yeah. No. Let's not do that. The Spirits Woke In. Yeah.
Having said that, considering the cultural landscape in 2001, should we say, it's interesting that it is still a diverse cast. It has a female lead character. There is at least one character of color. I could not tell you his name, unfortunately.
Ving Rhames.
Yes, his character.
Sarge, I think at some point someone refers to him as Sarge.
But it's interesting seeing that they were, I don't want to say pushing boundaries because that doesn't sound correct, but they had their attempt at doing something new and pushing the boundaries a little. And then they put Aki and Maxim.
Yes, they did, didn't they? Yeah.
Yes. So for those who are unaware, Maxim is a men's adult magazine produced internationally, and their tagline from Google is catering to the modern man with content that promises to seduce, entertain, and continuously surprise readers, which includes things like the hottest 100 women lists that they've been doing over the last however many. Aki placed at number 87 in that list of 2001.
I think the image I've seen of Aki in that is she's in a bikini, isn't she?
That's correct.
Right. So that might tie in with the whole, like, let's try and make her a Hollywood star thing. Because let's flip back to Aki as a character, because I think it's interesting to note that I think that Aki as a character is excellent as a female character. Like, actually, she's not sexualized at all. Necessarily, there's an element, there's a romance between her and Beige. So there is an element of like sexualization, like where they get it on a bit. But she is a very she's
a full character.
Yeah, she's a scientist, but she's practical. That's the word I was looking for. She's practical, and I like someone that I would like to talk to. You know what I mean? She's a real person. So that makes her attractive, shall we say? That makes sense as a character, as opposed to necessarily like, whoa, here she is in the magazine sort of thing, you know. And it actually kind of like goes against that. I think it's the point you were making there, is that like, let's go for something a bit more nuanced and expressive and diverse and tell a good story, and then let's just stick her on a cover of a magazine.
Let's just remember that we're in 2001 and we do these kinds of things.
It's almost like that. We've been too expressive. Let's just give something to the boys. Bikini. Like, no.
If you'll bear with me, because I do actually have a few points that I've written on. So I did actually. I was able to track down the scan of Aki's Maxim spread. One image. I was interested in looking at the text that actually accompanied it. And it took me a while to track down. Finally did it.
Oh, wow. Here we go. This is going to be fun.
It says here, why should Hollywood be concerned about an impending actors' strike when such completely computer-generated stars as Aki render flesh and blood thespians, not to mention their agents, downright obsolete? And then goes on to say that she makes her debut in the summer feature. And then on the back, I believe, of that page, there is a very quick, this is how we fooled you. And it's just a step-by-step of this is the wireframe, and then this is the pre-rendered model, and then this is the final image. I'm going to read the text out for these ones as well, because it's just, I don't know if this is the case of it's Maxim or it's 2001 or it's a case of both. But for the wireframe, it says a wireframe model is created, letting us control Arky's every pose and measurement. Tempted to abuse this power, we resist. ... For the render, it says next, a 3D picture of Arky is rendered. The silver sheen lets artists see how light will reflect off of her virtual bazookas and so on. Yeah, it really says that. And then the final image, the one with the actual skin, it is the least offensive of these ones. Artists wrap skin on Arky's body and obsess for days over adding individual freckles, strands of hair, etc. And voila, she lives.
Yeah, the most human part of it, the least sexy, like quote unquote part of it.
No,
that's weird.
Give me that wireframe.
Oh yeah, we like some wireframes. It reminds me of there's a game on PS2. Like PS2 is an interesting library on PS2 because it's probably, I think, it's one of the biggest libraries in the world of games.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of like weird games on it. Yeah, like a lot of the sort of obscure games on Sony platforms.
Like Mr. Mosquito.
Well, the Sony platforms, the first two, like most of the time, the obscure games tend to be pretty good. But as time went on onto PS2, so the first one, the obscure ones like Suikoden 1 and 2, they're really, really good games and they're really hard to get hold of. Whereas on PS2, like a lot of the weirder games became obscure a lot of the time. There's one called Demolition Girl. Right,
I've heard of that one. Yeah,
I own Demolition Girl because we was like, let's play this for like some like. Honestly, I was like, me and my friend were trying to make an ironically funny video out of it. It's difficult to do because it's basically the whole premise of Demolition Girl is that there's this bikini model gets bitten by a crab and becomes a giant woman.
That's why I don't go to the beach personally.
And the military send a helicopter in to look at this Godzilla type character. But the way to beat her is to take measurements of all of her body parts, and it's just like, oh my god! Like you're playing it, you're like, oh my god, we can make humor out of it, and there are channels that have made humor out of it. But it's just like playing it, I'm thinking, like people made this unironically. If they made it ironically and made it a bit funny, it would have been like, which is why some of the content that's come out around. I think the channel Triple Jump did something about it, and they like sort of took the piss out of it, and it was funny. But like, you sit there thinking, people sat here, like, consider how hard it is to make games and stuff like that. People sat here for about a time doing this. It's like, oh my god, like.
At what point does the concept of taking a lady's measurements become like just, it's not a turn on anymore? How many hours do you think you have to put into that kind of thing to get to that point?
Yeah. But poor Arky. Arky's a fabulous character.
So I did also find a few, considering that we were talking earlier about her attempting to become the world's first like virtual actress and how that's changed. I did actually go into looking to see if she was the first virtual actress or if there was anything else, and she wasn't. She was going to be the first, but there were actually others around the same kind of time that were doing similar things. So we had a virtual newscaster called Anna Nova, who was discontinued in 2004.
Really? Anna Nova?
Yep. You might laugh at this name. We had Webby2K, who was a virtual model whose looks were borrowed heavily from Tyra Banks, as well as a couple of other supermodels, I believe. A quote that
wow, these names are taking me back so much to like the early 2000s. I've not heard Tyra Banks in years.
But a quote from The Guardian on Webby2K, I believe, was, Tyra Banks is one of America's most successful black models, but Webby2K has been made white. As the old saying goes, the can is open and the worms are on the floor, which, again, it's just, there's so many really wonderful phrases that I want to bring back from 2001, honestly.
That is interesting, yeah.
There was also a bit from the New York Times where they referred to the whole general concept of virtual people as cyber babes.
Cyber babes.
Yeah, which is a fantastic term, but they immediately followed it up with not even a full sentence later with the concept of them had raised the ire of feminists, and the tone that it's taken is very clearly like, those women, right?
Things don't change, do they? Really? Like one person got slightly upset about something, and that's it. The entire army of people were saying it.
I mean, having said that, I don't think there is. You can't really discredit the idea of, well, there is a lot of unfortunate sexualization and depersonalization, especially as a woman on the internet as well.
Of course, there is.
But there was also a minute interview with Sakaguchi himself that I found, and this was him specifically trying to float the concept of Arky being able to be repurposed for whatever role that they decided to put her in. The quote here that I found, and this is from the official US PlayStation magazine, issue 47 in August, if you want to double check this one, where he said, "We can even have Arky come back as a 16-year-old girl, as if a 16-year-old girl is any different from a fucking whatever." PlayStation's comment on that was, That alone is sure to spark plenty of jealous looks from all the rest of the girls in Tinseltown. So things really haven't changed. I think the only other thing that I really have to add on to this is the word that they were using to describe Archie. I'm so sad that this one has been lost to time. It was a synthspion, which is just a fucking fantastic
That's called
portmanteau.
synthspion.
Yeah, well, I mean, right?
It's a really interesting delve into the past, because I think it's really sad that obviously, like, it's good to bring it up, by the way. It's really sad that, like, you look at this film in isolation, Archie's a great character. Mm-hmm. I would say, like, actually, genuinely, as a female lead in the film, a Final Fantasy game, she's up there. She could have been up there, but potentially this stuff made it worse. But I think a lot of that was like because at the time, I guess this kind of overt sexualization stuff was probably more generally acceptable. I'm not saying it should have ever been acceptable. But like nowadays, if you follow that discourse, obviously you get a lot more people going, "Don't be such a dick." Back then, it was a lot. It wasn't unheard of to see that sort of stuff in mainstream press.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's a lot.
We're exposed to that.
There's probably more of it, but in general, but it's a lot more like don't be a dick. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe like I don't want to point the finger at anyone in particular, but like potentially like that was just used as a scapegoat for people to poo-poo on the whole idea of the CG stuff, that they were frightened of replacing actors. I guess because they're an easy target. Let's just throw women under the bus. You know what I mean? Like that's probably what was happening, in my opinion.
And then we went on to have things like Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars sequels as well, and we're right back to having those synthspions all over again on the silver screen.
Yeah, Jar Jar Binks. Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking of Leia Organa.
Why wasn't Jar Jar Binks sexualized? I mean, come on. See him in FHM. Me's are called Jar Jar Binks. Would you like to see me take my shirt off? Oh no, we're getting more impressions is coming on later. Trust me.
Good Lord. So overall then, how did you feel about Spirits Within? Did you think
I liked
it was worthy of entry into the Final Fantasy series?
I actually think it is. And I'll point to like this. This is going to sound really weird. And obviously we're going to talk about two other films in a bit. This feels to me like the most Final Fantasy of these three entries.
It's interesting.
And you know why? Because they've got the way they got this cast set up. They've got a male and female love interest type thing going on, and then they've got the supporting cast, and then there's this big world problem, and then the world problem ends. And the villain is very. I mean, the look isn't necessarily like what the look of Final Fantasy was at the time, and then subsequently became. But the villain of James Woods flipping. I've written down here James Woods fuckboy villain.
It's just Albert Wesker without the glasses.
Yeah, and he is like a proper like warped zealot Final Fantasy villain, like proper. Like the world will. I think it's really interesting how. Like, so I think as a product and a Final Fantasy product, this is. I wouldn't say it's up there with the best, but it definitely is a fair entry. You know, that was pretty good. I'm on board with it. Yeah, it's quite interesting how some of the themes they followed as well. Like, it's interesting that you've got Archie and Sid are like the scientists, but they're viewed as being like the religious nutters kind of thing. You know what I mean? They're viewed as being like, oh, they believe in this sort of like fairy tale stuff. No. Whereas James Woods and his fuckboy army are proper like displaying themselves as being militaristic and, you know, no nonsense approach. But actually, they're the ones that are twisting the facts to meet their narrative, like almost like second by second. Like Archie reveals that she's got a part of a spirit within her. Hey, the spirit within, and everyone's like, "Oh my god, maybe she's onto something." And then he said, "No, she's under their control," like instantly, without thinking, maybe she's right. And it's like, wow, it's just quite interesting how like they're supposed to be the no nonsense real people, but they're the ones that are being more religious and believe in whatever they, you know, it's just really, really clever. I do like there's a line that James Woods comes out with later. He says, "No living thing could survive in those pipes," which just made me laugh every time I heard it. And I mean, I think narratively as well as a film, this works quite well. The way that they get everything ties together, like the through line of what's going on. Like, of course, they got the characters, the protagonists in one place and the villains in another place. You learn what's going on with the spirits throughout. You learn that they're actually like spirits and stuff like that. And of course, you see the thread learned by both the villain and the protagonist. I think it's a pretty well structured film. It's not bad.
I think the one thing that really threw me more than anything else this time around was the fact that it's actually set in the real world rather than like a fake Final Fantasy world. Specifically, we're going to Old New York. You know, we went to there was a thing that we captured outside Moscow. Like, Jesus Christ, okay, I wasn't expecting all of these real world things, but whatever. There's a fantastic review. I want to say review's probably the wrong word here. A watch from the good people over at Cosmonaut Variety Hour. They did a watch of the Spirits Within about 4 years ago. And one of the things that I took away from that 20-minute odd video that they put up was it's every movie and it's every game, but it's not Final Fantasy. And I kind of agree with them. There were a lot of things that were very, very Halo in it. There was a lot of things that was just very generic sci-fi. I did actually find a little excerpt from the Mass Effect 3 art director, Derek Watts, where they outright said, you know, we took a lot of inspiration from the Spirits Within in Mass Effect. You know, the early ships that they designed is actually in some of the early designs for the Normandy, that they used a lot of inspiration as far as the artwork was concerned. It's like, it's very, very sci-fi. I wouldn't necessarily call it Final Fantasy, and that's I'm including the modern or the more modern titles in that.
I think we'll get to the other films in a bit. I think the reason I think it's the most Final Fantasy of the three films is that it's probably the most Star Wars of the three films, which Final Fantasy is heavily influenced by. You know, like
that's a really good point, actually.
you know the whole, like, there's a one character which is Arky in this sense, and eventually everyone follows them, and all of a sudden they're in a ragtag band and they're moving along without realizing what's going on. That's the kind of Final Fantasy bit that I was alluding to. And then there's the over the top villain played by James Woods, who just sounds like Hades from fucking Hercules.
It's a very interesting mashup of the Final Fantasy and the sci-fi stuff in general.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like,
overall, I think my takeaway is that it's a pretty decent sci-fi film, actually.
Yes,
and
it is.
Even in 2024, I still think it looks fairly good. It doesn't look the best, don't get me wrong. It's definitely, parts of it have aged not fantastically, but it still looks very, very presentable.
I think it looks as good, if not better, than Advent Children, which is the next film we'll talk about in a bit. It doesn't look anywhere near as good as Kingsglaive, but it looks pretty good for 2001. It looks pretty impressive. It's a good little film. There is one more story, which is not my story, and someone told me this years and years ago, and it kind of goes into the discourse of, like, the Spirits Within isn't very good type thing. But he told me the story, and, like, he said that years and years ago, him and his family were robbed, unfortunately, and the thieves took everything in their house, and on the shelf they left the Spirits Within. Anyway, let's move on to the next film, which is Advent Children. And I thought this came out in 2004, but apparently it came out in 2005.
No, you're absolutely right. Advent Children came out in 2005 in Japan, and then in the US and the EU, it came out in 2006.
Yes,
so that was with the official dub.
Dilly dally, shilly shally. I had to say that first. Right, okay, I'm gonna put this out there. What the fuck is this film? What is it? What the fuck is going on? I have I generally got to the end and I was like, what the fuck have I just watched? This is, like, just for interest, I'll talk about my history with it first, because I just led into it there. I hadn't seen this film until 3 days ago.
Oh my god!
A week ago. So I had seen the fight scenes I'd seen before, like online in AMVs, and I'd seen the fight in the church and stuff like that, and I knew roughly the storyline, but I'd never seen the whole thing all the way through as a film.
Wow! So that's my Advent Children viewing. I wish that
exposure.
Was me.
And I was like, honestly, all the way through the film, I made some notes, but I was like, what am I watching? Like, legitimately. I think one of the reasons I left it so long is I didn't finish 7 properly until last year. So I think I wanted to actually get the proper experience, and it really didn't make sense when I watched it. But I thought, oh no, now I've played the game, I'll understand what's going on. No, I won't. So I've now given you my history is very limited. I knew it came out on UMD, and I was definitely very, very envious because I didn't have a PSP and my friend did, and I think I probably would have watched it if I got on a PSP back in the day. I know this was a massive deal. This was like probably launching the UMD thing, and it was a huge thing, and it was like, I guess in some ways, like, the way I perceived it at the time was it was an answer to the Spirits Within, and the fact the fan base wanted something that was more in tune with the games they grew up with, and of course 7's the obvious choice at the time. What's your brief memories or thoughts on it? Because I'm assuming you've seen it a lot more than me.
So I remember my first Advent Children viewing. I hope I never forget this memory. It would have been 2005 because it was very much the subtitled fan subbed version that I watched. Yes. I don't remember what time of year it was, but I think it was probably towards the end of the year. Me and my 2 best friends at school, who are the only people in my group of friends who played Final Fantasy or knew anything about it, we all got together and we've got Advent Children, like, we've downloaded Advent. Do you want to come after school and watch Advent Children? Like, fuck yes, I want to watch Advent Children. So we all crammed into my friend's tiny bedroom and we watched Advent Children on, like, a 600 by 900 CRT monitor, and I cried so fucking hard at the end of that movie that my friends actually asked if I was all right, and I was there like, fuck,
okay. I think I know why.
Yes. I had the time of my life watching that movie. It was
Really?
fun from start to finish, honestly. It was balls to the wall insane. It was Final Fantasy. It was Final Fantasy VII. It had Cloud doing things. It had Tifa doing things. It had new one-winged angel with extra like electric guitar. It was just fucking cool. Looking back on it now, yeah, what the fuck is this movie all about?
I think watching this after the remake project is a very different experience than before, I'd imagine, because we've got so much more in that now, and just animation games and stuff in general. I mean, it's probably very influential, this, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like there's a few cutscenes and fight scenes that are to die for. The fight between, spoiler alert, Cloud and Sephiroth at the end of the movie is absolutely insane. And I'm like, I was watching it thinking, how did this come out in 2005? This is just bonkers. Like, what they do with that fight. One of my favorite things about
that fight is you can see the weight that Sephiroth puts into the thing, and you don't usually get that from an animated film. You can't feel the sword swings.
And to be fair, I mean, I think like clearly they wanted to do remake a long time ago. They clearly, Final Fantasy VII, of all of the products they had, it was the one that the technology wasn't there to make what they wanted to make. Quite like, Star Wars was for George Lucas. Eventually he got what he wanted out of it. Whether the fans did or not is another thing. And clearly this was like, I don't think they give a fuck about the plot. I think they just wanted to make a fight scene between Cloud and Sephiroth. That's what they wanted. And they wanted to see Tifa kick ass in the church, which is really cool. The choreography in that is incredible. Mind you, it does very, very much feel post-Matrix, this.
It does.
You know what I mean? Clearly that the producers of Final Fantasy sat and watched The Matrix and went, we need to do a film, don't we? Yes, we do. You know what I mean?
I feel like it goes very much hand in hand with The Spirits Within and the fact that everything's rather colorless. That's one of my biggest takeaways. Advent Children, considering how brightly colored original 7 is, Advent Children is just so gray in comparison. Like, it is. I need a bit more color, more than just Vincent's cape and Reno's hair. I need a little bit more to keep me engaged. I wish they'd remembered that.
So it's interesting. I think you mentioned in the last episode, or maybe you mentioned talking to me offline, like, there's 2 versions of this movie. I've only seen one. And I've seen the extended one, which is the complete version?
Yes. So there was Advent Children, and then I believe it was in 2009, it was re-released as Advent Children Complete, which added about 26 extra minutes of content, which I think were originally deleted scenes, or the majority were deleted scenes, had re-recorded voice work in both Japanese and English. It had updated graphical fidelity. It's the complete version.
Probably. I'm assuming that it wasn't complete so it could fit onto a UMD. I don't know, because they were only about 1.8 gigs. I don't know. So I can't comment on what's in the original and what's not. I tried to find like a comparison online. It's very difficult to find. Back in the day, like for YouTube and stuff, like people used to have websites where they'd like do like frame by frame, scene by scene comparisons, and like at 26 minutes in, there's a cut and stuff like that. I'm sure something like that exists somewhere. You probably have more of a thing. The only thing I could see, apparently, that the opening Marlene talking is a little bit longer, I think.
I think that's one of the scenes. I know that because I watched Advent Children Complete for the first time last year. I'd only ever seen just the standard original Advent Children before then. The scene with Denzel finding Cloud's motorbike in front of the church, that's completely new. I didn't know that. I think there's a scene with the Turks in the helicopter that was either brand new or extended. There's not a lot that's rather, it's one of those things of, if you've watched the original, you can go, hang on, I don't remember this from 20 odd years ago, but watching it all together, it's cohesive. I can't complain about it. It gave me more Advent Children, so what's not to love?
You're clearly a fan. I mean, I did enjoy it. I did enjoy my time watching it. It was what the fuck is this? Was more like, I wasn't offended by it. I was more, shall we say, I was just like, what? I mean, I think probably looking at it like from a film like story perspective. The problem is, I think, with it, there's something which I'll talk about when we get to Kingsglaive in a bit. This is a little bit more of a framing device, like at the beginning, if that makes sense. It sets the scene a bit weirdly. Mm-hmm. Like it sort of goes, this is the world, this is what's going on with the world, and Sephiroth, blah, 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 blah. And then it throws you in, and then you don't see the characters interact with each other until about halfway through the movie. Mm-hmm. So it's very sort of like structurally, it's a bit weak in that sense, I think, because like there's no like there's a whole thread of like Cloud's gone off and done his own thing because he's clearly like grieving probably Aerith at this point, but there's no like scene at the beginning where they're all together like talking first and then he breaks off from that. It's like so it works as like an epilogue to Final Fantasy VII if you've just literally watched it.
Yeah.
But like on its own, it's a bit like I think they could have done a bit better with that framing at the beginning to make it a bit more easy to absorb, if that makes sense.
The thing for me about Advent Children is more than any of the other Final Fantasy feature films out there, it is for the fans. It's not for a new audience. It is for people who know the story. I believe I mentioned in episode 1 that I have a good friend who played FF7 for the first time recently and had avoided spoilers somehow. So after she'd finished FF7 a couple of months later, as a group, me, her, and a few other people, we all watched Advent Children online, and obviously it was her first time, and she was definitely like, okay, you know, I'm really glad that I played the game. This is absolutely blowing my mind. I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing. We had a couple of people in that call who had never interacted with FF7.
Right.
I believe the phrase, "what the fuck is going on," was uttered maybe about 5 or 6 times throughout the movie. They just did not have a clue. And it was actually quite eye-opening to me as someone who's obviously, I don't know a life without these games or without these knowledge. So to view AC from a completely different lens and go, actually, if I was just watching this, I'd be confused as all hell. Like, why is any of this happening?
It's interesting. In the last episode, we talked about I talked about Dragon Ball Z for a bit, and it's interesting how, like, and I mentioned about the games in that franchise, and how those games were like never really rated particularly high. They were like 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 games in games magazines and stuff like that. But like for a fan of the games, they were 8 out of 10s, 9s out of 10s. You know what I mean? Like like that extra thing you already have about exposure to the source material elevates them, and people that don't play them don't understand them. I think necessarily it's probably a lot of it.
I think that's very much reflected in the reviews as well. I had a quick look at the Rotten Tomatoes reviews. Rotten Tomatoes themselves gave Advent Children a solid 50%. The audience gave it 84%. Like, obviously, it reached the audience that it was going for. The people that it was marketed towards fucking loved it. Or at least loved parts of it, but everyone else was left a bit like, what the fuck is going on?
I do like. I think if I was to like rewatch a party again, I'd enjoy it a bit more, because I mean, like I said, I did enjoy it, but like because I was trying to work out what was going on with the story. Now I don't really give a shit about the story. I just want to see the spectacle. I'd probably enjoy it a bit more. You know, like I'd know what points of the film to look at my phone, like anything that has Denzel in it, basically. Sorry, Denzel's a stupid character. Why didn't they just have it as Marlene? Why did they just bring some random kid in? And that was, by the way, that was a bit that made no sense, by the way. I think it was like the timeline. It might have been because the complete part of it. Like there's a bit at the beginning where Denzel appears and it looks like he's new to the scene, and then he meets Tifa. And then there's like all of a sudden a cut to like the house, and there's a picture of Cloud, Tifa, and Denzel together. And it's like, well, hang on, like, with you hang around with him for a while. And that's the bit that got me. I was like, what is he supposed to be? I was like, why have you done this? Why didn't you just have Marlene?
I would need to double check this one. I believe the answer lies somewhere deep within the compilation. I think it's one of those things that's mentioned in like a side material book once, and that's the same way that like the fact that Rufus Shinra has extra brothers is in side material only. I fucking hate the compilation so badly. Oh my god.
Yes, I gathered you hate. Well, you hate the compilation, but you like this. What's going on?
Listen, I'm a person of many multitudes.
Like that I think it rubs me up the wrong way. Stuff like that, where they like shoehorn a character in that has nothing to do with any of the other characters, and they sort of like don't get it there. It reminds me of like, are you a Sonic fan at all?
I think I played the first game when I was about 6 years old.
But like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 with like the big 3D games that came out on Dreamcast, and then eventually GameCube, and then eventually PlayStation 3, I think. And they were like Sonic in the real world, and they're classics, right? Then they made an anime called Sonic X, which came out just after they came on, and it was set in the real world. But then they shoehorned this character Chris into it, who was an annoying kid who like was in all these scenes from the game that there's no point in him in being there. Like, and he's like why would they just make a story about flipping Sonic? I was like, so like that. He feels like that. He feels like the Chris of this flipping world to me. Like, why is he here? Why can't they just have Marlene as a flipping character, as a side character? That would have been better, in my opinion.
A bigger one for me, rather than Denzel, because I don't mind the introduction of new characters. I mean,
I don't mind the introduction of new characters. I just didn't feel like he earned it, man. Like, what's going on?
The biggest one for me was, so Barrett is the leader of Avalanche that we're aware of in FF7.
Yes.
You know, they slightly changed this in remake, and the rest of the compilation is just being part of a cell. But he's a very ecologically friendly man. Why did they turn him into an oil baron?
Did they turn him? I don't really remember.
His whole thing is he's off looking around the rest of the world for new sources of energy now that Marco energy is no longer a thing. And he says, oil, that's the next big thing. Barrett Wallace is not an oil tycoon.
I don't remember. I just remember him saying "foo" like Mr. T twice in this movie. I was like, they went full on Mr. T.
Too.
They went on full on Mr. T with him. I was like, what? Like,
I'm so glad that they didn't follow through with that in remake. Would have broken me, I think.
Probably says it. Like, oh my god, like he actually is Mr. T. Like, I'll point out voice acting. Right, let's get on to the voice acting in this movie. I'm really sorry, but Rachel Lee Cook as Tifa, she's not all that.
I know some people that would fight you to the death for
But
that
she's
opinion.
not. But did you get the joke there? She's not all that. Because Rachel Lee Cook plays the main character in the film. She's all that.
Oh, fucking Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Jack,
sorry.
You're going to kill me with this.
But God, she's nothing on Britt Baron. Britt Baron's fantastic as Tifa. Oh my God. Like,
she really, really is.
Like, I just think she's just a bit dull in this movie, like Rachel Lee Cook. I don't know why. It just doesn't really hit it for me.
I feel like... So I've watched Advent Children in Japanese and I've watched Advent Children complete in English. And again, my first time listening to it in English was only last year. Very, very strange to have a different auditory experience, let me tell you. The Japanese audio is actually pretty solid, in my opinion. The English cast does an admirable job, but doesn't quite live up to it. I think for the characters that they play, or rather for the voices that we've become accustomed to hearing over the last years, and this is before the remake project absolutely just wiping the slate clean and giving it, which they didn't do in Japanese. It's still the original voice actors in Japanese, yes, with the exception of Reno's voice actor, who sadly passed away a year or two ago. It's one of those things of, you can tell that they were doing their best. Their best wasn't good enough for me. I couldn't differentiate very well between who was saying what. Steve Burton sounded like Matt Mercer to me. It was all... Yeah. Everyone was very much the same.
Hang on, which again, I'm terrible with names. So I know that Crispin Freeman appears in this movie.
Yes, Crispin Freeman's Reno, isn't he?
He's rude, I think. Is he? Is he rude? Or, I think he might be rude. I know that he's the TV announcer, so that's interesting. For pointing out, so that, you know, when on the news, you hear the news announcer. That's Crispin Freeman in this movie. What's interesting is Crispin Freeman is also the news announcer in the Rebirth. You know, the trailer. I don't know if you played Rebirth yet, but like the trailer where they pull the bodies out. That's Crispin Freeman doing the TV voiceover there. And I believe he's the TV voiceover in Kingsglaive as well. So I don't know why he got TV voiceover job. Because like he's so under... I mean, Crispin Freeman is an absolute... I mean, like, what an actor. I mean, he obviously plays Togasar in Ghost in the Shell. And he plays absolutely brilliantly in... have you seen Haruhi Suzumiya, the anime?
Oh, I haven't, no, but that brings me back to the same time era as
his performance, I mean, obviously that's one of those dub versus sub stuff goes on for years, but like he's one of those ones where if you watch that program dubbed, like it's probably like his performance is just to die for. So like it's almost like, oh, we'll just stick him in the background playing a TV announcer. He does it very well, but it's like, you know, why did you keep him on the bench, guys?
So I have just looked it up. You're right, Crispin Freeman was rude. I'm thinking of Quentin Flynn, who was Reno.
Right, okay. I'm usually very terrible with names unless I know the actor really, really well.
No, I
don't
blame you at all.
Well. But no, I mean, I'm sure Rachel Lee Cook's good in Advent Children and other stuff, but just in this one, she's just a bit, don't know, just doesn't hit it. Nowhere near as well as Britt Baron's an absolute, like, honestly, that performance in those movies, like how she twines in vulnerability with being a kick-ass person as well, is just like to die for.
Yeah, no, 100%. Nothing to disagree with there.
Of course, I got a note here. Sephiroth is back, and this time his sword is bigger.
Yeah, well, you know, death does things to a man.
Wow. Goodness gracious me. And I've written another note here that there's photos of Denzel. How long's he been there? Who cares about Denzel? I think I should get off the Denzel hate wagon. I'm
going to make you a shirt that just has Denzel's face on it.
Good, don't do it. I mean, like, I think, again, looking at this, like, without the sort of, there's a rating, I think it was in one of the magazines years ago, it's like, or someone, I heard someone talking about the other day, which is Head versus Heart. I think, like, the structure of this movie, Cloud's grieving, and the whole idea is he gets a grip and moves on at the end. But it's not really clear from the narrative whose story this is supposed to be. I think that's probably why I get upset with Denzel, because you don't see Cloud's like a secondary character till the end. It's what it feels like. And there's this whole thing about obviously these kids getting abducted by Kadaj. And right, by the way, is Kadaj, you know the names, don't you? The three flipping Sephiroth clones, right? What happened to the third one?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
It's just like there's a female one, isn't there? There's the one. Like there's Kadaj.
They're all male, I'm afraid.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure I read some, or maybe I read it on, maybe it's another film I found.
Someone's been on AO3 and fanfic.net.
That might have been it. Are they all? I'm sure I read some. Maybe it's just that glorious hair that I've associated
hair is
L'Oreal with you with. But clearly the third one wasn't in the movie. Like, what's that about? There's the Dora one, like the derpy one. Who, like, what does he say? You're a meanie, and I was like,
yeah, no, even back in 2005, that one was a bit like.
And then Kadaj, who pretty much just should have been the only one there was. Like, why did they make three? I don't understand. Like, what's that about?
So I believe the intent was actually So Sephiroth at the end of Final Fantasy VII is dead and is assimilated back into the live stream. Yeah, sorry, my bad. And is assimilated back into the live stream, or like attempted to anyway. The whole idea of the three remnants, and they are known colloquially as remnants, like that. I think that's the official, is they are remnants of Sephiroth. They are the individual facets of his personality. I think Loz is meant to be like Sephiroth's brute strength. Yazoo is meant to be like his confidence, and Kadaj is meant to be the instability of a young man from like a war front, and like the cruelty as well. So altogether, you get more of a solid picture of Sephiroth. But when he split into his individual components, the remnants is what you're supposed to get. Apparently,
maybe the third one was the one that the Sephiroth that no one could find. in the game, maybe that's what they were going for. Oh, we'll just send, because I was just like, there's three of them. Where's the third one gone? What's going on? Unless Vincent killed him, like because Vincent turns up in the most random scene in the world when they've got the children in the flipping the lake bit. It's a sexy coat, looks really cool. But he's like, Vincent, how you doing? And then like just walks off.
Like, we need to read out Advent Children, and you need to do that voice.
Me and Vincent, and again, you've trapped me. Dirge of Cerberus, like his clearly they wanted to underuse him for this because he just appears. It's like there's a little bit of that, isn't there? Like all the characters have got to appear just to get on the screen time. Barrett appears towards the end of the movie. Tifa's in this a lot, which is cool. I like her outfit as well. I think it's really a practical.
It's a wonderful design, actually. I really enjoy it. It's practical. It's fun. It looks good. It suits the world as well, which is always a big bugbear for me. I hate when designs look like they were just designed to be cool and don't match everything around them. Really
interesting though as well. I mean, like the fidelity on like characters' muscles is better now. Like comparing it to the Rebirth and remake, like their arms were like a lot not quite in sort of
defined,
not defined the same way. And what's interesting about Tifa's design in the newer games, and the same with Cloud as well, is that they are like, clearly Tifa's a gym monster. So she's, I wouldn't say ripped, but she's in very good shape because she hammers the gym or boxes or whatever. Whereas in this, like obviously the technology not necessarily was there because she look at her and I'm like, wow, okay, that's not quite as, the same with Cloud as well. You see him with his arms and it's a little bit like not quite there, but no, something they clearly got better at.
So do you know about any of the behind the scenes stuff at all?
Other than the fact that they don't think they cared about the plots. That's all I know about. Like they were just like, that's pretty much all I know.
Interesting that you say that, because that was absolutely not the case.
Is it not?
No.
Wow, maybe that's just some comment on flipping YouTube. You don't give a fuck about the plot. No, I don't know. I don't know anything about this movie, how it was made or anything like, other than the fact that it came out on the PSP and it was supposed to be a tie-in with the PSP and stuff like that.
So as far as the I think it was with the Blu-ray release, or was it just the standard DVD release? Either one. There was a half an hour-ish extra movie called Distance, the making of Advent Children, which I tracked down and watched. And it has like interviews and little excerpts with Tetsuya Nomura, Takeshi Nozue, and Kazushige Nojima. So those would be director, the producer, I believe, and the art director. So people who were fairly involved with everything that was going on. Now Nojima, who was the person, Nojima wasn't a director, he was the script writer. Nojima has a quote relatively early on with, I didn't just want to do it, I felt like it was either now or never, as in like they had to make Advent Children because everyone was just on board and felt really good about it and stuff like that. They all sound so passionate and so really into everything that they made that it almost feels like it made my appreciation of Advent Children way elevated. The end product could be whatever, but seeing the amount of time and hope that they all really had for this and genuine love. Nomura says at one point, there are parts in the film where people might think people can't jump that far or they can't stay airborne for that long, and so many creators put a restriction on themselves in regards to that. We decided not to care about that.
No, that stuff's cool.
I think he says, as long as it looked cool, we wrote our own rules. We had camera angles you can't replicate. We had stuff that was completely unrealistic, but we wanted to do it because of the nature of this project. We wanted to do what other people hadn't done, which is such a really good take on creating something. I think, you want to make something that no one else has made before, that no one else will try to make again. You want to have your own thumbprint on it.
I will say the cinematography in this film is to die for. It's absolutely fantastic. Like that does stand out. I wasn't trying to say that it was. I think it was like the plotting and whether the story makes sense. I mean, I think you're kind of alluding to it there. Like they didn't care is probably the wrong phrase. It's more on the lines of like it was secondary, like how coherent it was as a narrative. It was
I think the whole thing was actually written originally. The script done by Najima was like 20 minutes long, and Nomura liked it so much. It's like, yeah, just expand this.
Totally. And I mean, like it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, like you look at the ideas of like the compilation we've discussed. I mean, Crisis Core, obviously as a prequel. I mean, it's a weird game. I mean, I actually really like the game Crisis Core. The story and how it tries to shoehorn certain people in certain places they shouldn't be is a little bit like really.
But it's a good game, but it leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a game, like the engine, like it could have been anything else that wasn't Final Fantasy, and I would have enjoyed the way it played. Basically, is where I'm coming from. Dirge of Cerberus, I've talked about before. It feels a lot like this movie, actually. I mean, I don't think you got to Dirge of Cerberus yet, have you? Like as a game,
I haven't.
Like
no.
The game, like it's a pretty dull game, but there's lots of ideas in there which are fantastic. It just the kitchen sink was thrown in basically, and I feel like the same feeling with here is like everything was thrown in. I mean, rightfully so, really. I mean, it's good stuff. It's not like I'm offended by it being bad or anything like that. It's just like, I mean, I think what they were probably struggling with at the time, bearing in mind they were the trailblazers, and I think this is probably a little bit true of Final Fantasy Spirits Within as well, is that it's very difficult to tell this kind of story in a movie compared to a game. Because in a game, you're with the characters for a long time and you pick up who you like and who you want in your party and everything like that. Whereas here, they were like, how can we put in who likes who and who's famous? And of course, all the characters in Final Fantasy VII are all, apart from, I think Kate Sith is, like, a lot of people don't like Kate Sith or Catchy or whatever you want to call him. But like, how do we give everyone enough screen time?
That's the thing where I think Advent Children falls down way more than any of the other movies because it is a sequel rather than something like completely brand new. They know that, they want to create this thing wonderful, whatever, but at the end of the day, they also know they do still have to appeal to the hardcore fans that they're making this for. You need to introduce all of these characters. Like, at no point was it really necessary for Yuffie to come along and have a little materia spiel, but we the fans, we know her. Yuffie likes materia, so we've got to have that in. You have to have everyone or you don't have anyone.
Yuffie is so mistreated in the compilation. I think she's in Rebirth. I played the Rebirth demo, let's put it that way, and I think she's done really well in that. But in the compilation, honestly, they go too far down the insipid child route. And I think like I think it's a comment I made in my review of Dirge of Cerberus. Like in the opening cutscene to Dirge of Cerberus, Yuffie's there because they made that game to like feature the two characters which are optional characters.
Yeah.
And she's in it, and she looks younger in the after the 2-year time span in game, and it's just really jarring because they wait for let's go for this. She's the silly little dolly sort of like little girl character, and it's like. Like it's better when she's a bit more of a sort of like she appears in. I'm sure you've seen the demo in Rebirth where they fight the monster in Under Junon. And she's like in a boat and stuff. Have you seen that yet? I don't know. Spoil it for you. No, spoiler alert. It is in the main game, but it's in the demo. But basically, like, it's not really a spoiler that they have brought her into the game more than just a random girl you find in the forest. Like she's more in the narrative, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think from what I've seen, which isn't a lot, she is served a lot better in the remake project than she is in the compilation.
Oh, that's really good to know, actually.
From what I've seen, because there's a scene in Dirge of Cerberus where she's like saves the day. You think, isn't Yuffie cool? She saves Vincent's life. You're like, I like Yuffie, she's cool. And then she just goes and falls over, and it's like almost the same point we made before about isn't Arky a cool character? No, let's talk about her body. Like it's like oh, isn't Yuffie a cool character? Oh, look, she's actually a stupid teenage girl. It's kind of like that angle, and I don't really like that. It's a bit. Whatever.
Yeah, it's frustrating to say the least.
Yes, a little bit
because I like potential in a character, and then
I think Yuffie's cool. Oh yeah, we can go on down a rabbit hole with that. What else have I got as a note? I mean, because I'm relative newcomer to this thing. I will definitely watch it again. Dilly dally shilly shally. What is that? What the fuck does dilly? They say it at least 3 times in this fucking movie. What the fuck does that mean? Cloud even says it at the end. Dilly dally shilly shally. It's like what?
So I saw all the dilly dally shilly shally memes for the longest time, and I had to piece together because obviously I didn't watch the English version until last year. I didn't know that it was a thing until someone was like, "No, it's actually a phrase that they use."
A dubism.
The Japanese that they use in that initial scene where they're in the bedroom, and she says that initially, is zuru 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 zuru, which is onomatopoeia. And Japanese as a language has a fair amount of onomatopoeia. Yeah. You might have heard a few of them, like doki doki to like loving heartbeats, and nade nade for rubbing a cat's head. Just a lot of cutesy things like that, which is just fucking impossible to translate well and for lip flaps in English. It's just not something that you can do succinctly. Dilly dally shilly shally is probably the best that they could have done. Unfortunately, the best is shit.
Yes. If I was sat in a bedroom with a girl and she said dilly dally shilly shally to me, I'm leaving.
Bit like Cloud then.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, Cloud made the right decision at that point. I mean, if these people keep saying weird shit to him, he's going to leave, isn't he? I mean, I don't blame him. Yeah, I understand. We talked about this quite a bit with the lip flap thing of like how they matched what's said in Japanese. I think like they've gotten a lot better at this over time.
Yes.
Understanding how to translate the meaning of things with the guys, which is like, you know, it's the same with a lot of languages, but I think particularly in with Asian languages, with the way that I think it's more the alphabets and the kanji and stuff like that. Like one figure can be a longer sentence and things like that. As you can use one word to mean a bigger thing in English or whatever. Obviously, that I'm not a big language guy, so I don't know. But I know that they've worked out the nuances of things a little bit better as time's gone on with things.
Not even just that. My brain is telling me that this happened in Kingsglaive. I would like to substantiate that with the source, but I know that at least in other media, if not strictly within the Final Fantasy universe, there have been instances of the animations actually being redone to match the language rather than just fitting lip flaps to whatever, which, you know, I'm sure takes a lot of manpower and a lot of actual time to be able to do, but works so much better in the final product.
I think so. I mean, some people get a bit, the proper weeaboos get a bit upset about you touching the sacred artwork. Because I know that like abridged series people that dub like anime and stuff like that, they'll just have the lip flaps moving a bit longer or a bit shorter for things, and I think it looks so much better. Yeah, well, oh my god, that scene's two seconds shorter. Who cares? That's my perspective on it. And the argument always against it is like subtitles versus dubs is like, oh, the artwork's affected. Yeah, but you've got words over the top of it as well now, you know. So I mean, there's this weird dub versus sub argument. I think like as time's gone on, dubbing has gotten a lot better. I mean, we talked about before about the early comical bad dubs. Let's throw in like swearing and stuff like that, and some horrendously offensive stuff early on. Like it's funny when you look at it now because it's like, you know, it's hilariously offensive, but it's also like it's not put in to be offensive. It's put in to sell videos to teenage boys, and you look at it and you're just like, oh, you know, it's now like the output. I mean, like there's a lot more newer talent coming, isn't there? I mean, we talked about Hollywood and being a big input into Final Fantasy the spirits within. In this game, all the voice acting are all like anime dubbers. You know?
Which is one of those things that you don't really think would have too much of a difference, really. And then you sit and you listen to the product and you're like, actually, these people are a lot more experienced with doing this kind of work than, you say, Alec Baldwin is with, Beige. I will never be able to call him Grey again. Thank you so much.
His name's Beige. That's definitely it. He's Beige from now on. Right.
But Beige it's just a very it's just a very different style of acting, in my opinion. And the fact that these people have obviously been doing it in games and in anime for so long before, the final product comes together much more coherently, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. A couple more things to mention from my perspective. Flip phones.
Flip phones. I was wondering when we get to this.
Flip phones. Flip phones. There's a bit where my favorite character, Denzel, picks up the phone and Tifa's like, "Is Cloud there?" Blah, 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 blah. That's a bit weird.
Do you know what the phone's model is? Because it's a real phone that was made.
Is it a Nokia Razr?
No, it's a Panasonic, I'm afraid. Panasonic Foma P900 IV. I believe it was only released in Japan, and it had clips of Advent Children like pre-installed on the phone, which is just wonderful.
Does a Nokia Razr appear at any point during?
I don't think so.
I might be thinking of The Matrix. The Matrix clearly had an influence on this bloody movie. Like, a couple of like deeper points. I'm sure you'll probably add to them in somewhere. There's the "not I thing I don't cherish" speech at the end.
Yes.
Which is that did get me when I was watching it. I thought, wow, that's powerful. You know, that's like, wow, okay. Because the good part of this movie, I mean, I sound like I've been slagging it off or not. I did enjoy myself. The payoff at the end with Cloud basically just kicking depression to the curb is just fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. And like, target everything you cherish. And he says, "That's not a thing I don't cherish." And that's a really good way of summing up, really, isn't it? Like, opportunity, I'm still alive, basically.
Yeah.
You know, it's really good.
So there's a couple of really good quotes from the making of. I've credited one of them here as Nomura. He says, overall, you know, I think Cloud still has a very long, hard road ahead of him. But at the end of this road, I think he'll find his personal salvation, which you can very easily see is the end point of Advent Children. Like, he's able to start that journey.
Yeah.
But more than anything, there's a really, really interesting point, Nomura's talking about, what makes a hero. Is Cloud a hero? He's the main character. And he says, I think Cloud is very weak, actually. Children think of heroes as having no weaknesses, or if they do, they're just quirks. Even I, Tetsuya Nomura, wonder how Cloud can be as weak as he is. But on the other hand, that just makes him more human.
Yes.
He's still a hero. I just don't think there are as many heroes as weak and as real as he is. And he goes on to say, I hope that people who see Cloud, maybe even other weak men, will see that they too can become strong when surrounded by friends. And it's like, yes, that is the purpose of it. Like, you have to find your happiness, and really, you've got to put in the work, but it's worth it.
And there's the thing as well. There's the actually leads me on nicely to my next point, which is around the fact that the Remnants call him brother. Which I don't know if Sephiroth ever calls him that in the game.
No, he does not.
But that's really, there's like a pull back to how you're born. I mean, obviously he wasn't born as a remnant, but he was like manipulated, wasn't he? And
artificially created,
who you choose to be kind of angle, which again, influenced by the Matrix. Like,
I think also a good chunk of that, specifically within 7. It's also in due part 2. Cloud still has Genova cells within him. And, if these are Sephiroth's remnants, of course, they're going to find kinship with him.
Yeah, he's one of them somewhat.
One of us.
One of us. And that's the point. They're pulling him one of us. They're fighting him, but they're saying, you are one of us. And he's like, no, fuck you. And that's the important part. Quite interesting. I've made a note here. Cloud is called brother. Maybe they are Hulk Hogan. Brother, like that's it.
We need that dub immediately.
Yeah, Hulk Hogan, like Kadash coming in and being like, hey, Cloud, you want to lift some weights with me, Cloud? Let's go, lift some weights.
Kadaj doesn't lift weights.
Okay, sorry, Cloud. You want to come and find my mother with me? Yeah.
You weren't kidding about the impression.
Yeah, no, I've planned it all.
One of my only other points that I have to bring up is the OST. What did you think of it?
It was all right. It was well with the film. The remix of One Winged Angel was fantastic.
Yes.
But it was like there were few points where I really thought with the games. Obviously, like the song you can associate with an area and stuff like that is very particular with games. I didn't get much of that in this movie.
Right, okay.
But it did with the One Winged Angel stuff at the end, without a doubt.
Because they did use a couple of piano renditions of tracks from the original.
See, I didn't actually, in the church, the piano theme they used there, I didn't rate that, I'm honest. I like the arrangement was good, but I just don't think it was too soft for the fight. It should have been a proper get in there.
No,
sort of thing.
I agree. Actually, it's not one of my favorite tracks, but the Advent Children OST is one of those things that I can just listen to. It's a fun time.
It was good music, and I'm sure I'm a proper music nerd, so I listen to music away from the movie and get a different take for it. But it wasn't bad. It wasn't, but I think with the what scenes going on, where stuff, I think it's probably why I was taken out a little bit. That One Winged Angel stuff at the end, the remix of that's fantastic. Shocking moment when Cloud gets shot as well. That's
that one takes you, and then he's fine, so don't worry about it. he'll we've fine because he's a superhero than a bullet wound.
Yeah.
As far as the music goes, there are a couple of excerpts with Uematsu in the behind the scenes. He was the one to propose that they added rock music into the mix. So fucking good on you, man. That's because
Uematsu's a proper rock and roller.
Yeah, he really is, isn't he?
I've seen him in person. I've not met him. I've seen him in person on stage. He's just such a cool dude, isn't he?
You can tell that's a man that loves what he does.
Well, considering the fact that most of the flipping the final boss themes are just basically Deep Purple songs.
Yeah.
That's an episode we can do a Final Fantasy music, because funny enough, probably apologize to listeners. Like I mentioned, we'll talk about the music in a bit, and then we never do. I have to mention now before we move on, because I don't want to do that again. I mentioned about Recess School's Out. The reason I mentioned Recess School's Out earlier is because James Woods, who plays Hades and also plays the villain in that, is the villain in Recess School's Out. That was the link. Obviously, I think you talked about you crying at the end of the movie. Presumably, it's because of the ending of Zack and Aerith walking away.
No, that entire scene absolutely destroyed me. It's one of those things that listening to the musical cue from the soundtrack just on its own still gets me a little bit choked up, and there is very definitely a reason for that. Uematsu himself, he actually said in the behind the scenes thing, he read the script to get an idea of what the music would be like, and there's one part where he saw the words "Cloud Smiles" and he went, Cloud smiles? Oh my god. I don't think anyone who played FF7 can imagine Cloud smiling. I can't imagine him smiling. So, I thought that has to be good. I'll create a piece of music that accurately represents that hope and that oh my god, he fucking outdid himself. That entire scene is just
it is a moving scene.
Century.
It's definitely a moving scene. I mean, there's an interesting point in that where iconography is the right word, but obviously they put Cloud in the water. which is very much like what Cloud does with Aerith in the game.
Yeah.
And there's an element of that, like he obviously puts her in there because she's dead, but there's like an element of like maybe this will heal her kind of thing. He's healed from the same thing. So there's an element of like he survived and she didn't, and that's not her like him like rubbing it in that she died, but he's like, I'm alive, like I'm still here.
Advent Children's End is one of those things that really just it makes me feel like, oh, everything's gonna be all right. That's the kind of feeling that I come away with every time.
It is good. Shame about Denzel though. I think what I did like about this as well, and this is probably my last point, it's a weird point to end on, but Rufus, right? One, he turns up with a big flipping towel on his head.
Yeah.
At the beginning, he's covering up his whatever he's got going on with him. But I thought he was really cool in this movie.
Yeah, he is, isn't he?
I thought, like,
you son of a bitch, you shouldn't even be alive. How dare you be this fucking awesome?
But he's like, so like, I mean, again, having finished 7 last year, the full game, there's a moment I think where Barrett, when Cloud's in his wheelchair and Tifa and Barrett wake up wherever they wake up, Barrett makes some comment about, oh, actually, Rufus is doing some good.
Yeah,
like, and I think they play on that a lot here of like there's the good and evil thing of like Rufus actually has some good qualities, because there's a moment where he turns around to Kadaj and like he throws flipping the Genova stuff off and he goes, a good mother would know where the good son was know where his mother is, and I thought that's so cool. Like, and he just throws it off the flipping roof, and I was like, you know what? You're cool as fuck. That is probably the coolest moment in the film. I was like,
you can be the biggest anti-Shinra person around, and even you have to be like, it's like, actually, fuck yeah.
Fair play.
Yeah, fair play to you, Rufus.
That's my closing.
We'll pour one out for Denzel. We'll pour one out for Rufus Shinra.
So now we move on to the third and final movie, Kingsglaive. Is it Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15 or is it Final Fantasy 15 Kingsglaive?
I believe it's Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15
because things do that.
Square Enix can't seem to keep the titles.
Yeah, they don't want you putting stuff on the shelf in order. They don't want you putting the stuff on the shelf in order. They're just like, troll, lol.
Oh, you know, one of the biggest annoyances in my Steam library is having Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 13 2, and then Lightning Returns is all the way fucking somewhere else. Oh my god.
Well, Dirge of Cerberus is elsewhere on the shelves, but that's just, that's a good thing. Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15. So you've mentioned, I don't know if you've said this on recording, that you've watched this, 6 times?
Yes. So my history with 15 is, it exists. No, it would have been 2022. My best friend and another very good friend of mine conspired together, the bastards, to make me finally aware of Final Fantasy 15, because up until that point I had staunchly avoided everything to do with it.
Any reason why?
I knew that it had released and I knew that people had enjoyed it. I knew the names of some of the characters and that was it. I had no intention of playing it. I just didn't have any interest in it whatsoever. Part of that reasoning was I did not own a PS3 or a PS4.
Yeah,
so it was kind of like, I'll just fucking never play it then. And then I found out how shit it was and I was like, there's no point in playing it then.
Interesting.
So my friends, upon hearing that, were like, okay, let's sit you down and give you an education. Boy, they gave me a fucking education. So I was made to sit down and watch Kingsglaive. It wasn't terrible, actually. And then they, I'll talk about this more in depth in a later episode, I think. And then we got through the rest of Final Fantasy 15. And boy, it's been 2 years since then. That's all I have to say on that.
See, it's interesting because my history with Final Fantasy, the last, other than 10, which I spoke about before, that I had this like love-hate relationship with for a while, 13, 15, and 16 are the games that have made me get the next console.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So 13 made me get a PS3. I didn't play much of it. 15 made me get a PS4. I didn't play much of it. And then 16 made me get a PS5, and I finished that and quite liked it. Or I think really liked it actually, but that's another subject for another day. But 15, I didn't get on with 15. From what I understand, it's a slow burn. And my understanding, and you might know more than me, originally Kingsglaive was supposed to be the game, and then they like changed their minds halfway through. My take on this movie, I had to pause it halfway through and nearly watched it. I watched it yesterday, last night, and I paused it halfway through and went, I'm going to watch the rest tomorrow morning because I got so bored. If I'm totally honest with you, visually it looks fantastic. What is Lena Headey doing in this movie?
The same thing that Sean Bean's doing in this movie.
I thought. See, I mean, I guess it's one of those soft spot things. I thought Sean Bean, out of all the actors that were like Hollywood actors, is the one that's all right. Again, I'm not a massive 15 fan, but the actors that play the characters in the game are so much better. I don't know if Nick's Dingo, whatever his name is, comes back. I don't know.
He does not. No,
he does not. Well, that's a shame. Aaron Paul flipping Breaking Bad. You can tell who was popular at this point when this game came out, can't you?
He did a fucking good job.
Honestly. They give good performances. They get good performances, but I don't know.
I think a very big chunk of it was the fact that I'm presuming you know at least a little bit about the history of 15.
I know that my understanding of 15 was that it was over budget and they ran out of budget and they ran out of time because there was going to be like another set of DLC that came out, wasn't there? That never got released.
Yes.
And I know that there was a massive drive for this to be pushed with PlayStation 4 as well. I know that came out, the PlayStation 4 had already been out for a time. There was a real massive marketing drive for this game as being like a return to form kind of thing, because 13 was well selling, but not critically, or it was not received as well by the fan base or something like that. And I know that 15 was supposed to, I think the original 14 wasn't as well received, and I think 15 was supposed to be like the return to form. We'll get all the old cast, all the old crew back in. That's my very, very, really badly worded way of saying roughly I know what went on, but not in detail.
15 was originally titled Versus 13.
Oh, yes, right.
And was originally shown off at E3 2006. And
was
then
that early?
Yes. And then it took 10 years to be released
right.
as Final Fantasy 15. It underwent numerous rewrites and characters changing and plots changing. And honestly, to the point, like, we have no idea just how much actually changed over the years. I would love to know the various things that have been left on the cutting room floor over this time. I think the only thing that we're like really 100% positive on is that Kingsglaive was meant to be the original first half of the game Final Fantasy 15, and then they decided to kind of just promotional. And I think this is just the sense I get. I don't really have any like numbers to back this one up, but I think the whole vibe was we've spent so much time and so much energy rewriting. This has to do well. So if we star this cast and if we really market the fuck out of this thing, maybe it'll do well. And, you know, fair play to them. That's a decent marketing strategy. They did get some fantastic stars in.
Yeah.
Lena Headey, Sean Bean, Aaron Paul.
Yeah.
It looks visually, it looks absolutely fantastic.
Lena Headey, fabulous actress. Sean Bean, fabulous actor. Yeah, Aaron Paul is all right. I mean, I could hear his voice, and it's like, not that I've seen Breaking Bad, but I could just hear it in there. I don't know. Lena Headey's great, and there's some great films that probably only I've heard of that she's in. She's in Dread. She's a villain in Dread as well as she's been in Game of Thrones. I don't know. She just feels like does not fit. What's the character's name? Luna Freya.
Luna Freya. Yes.
Like if you listen to the actress that plays Luna Freya in the game, she's so good. Like I mean, like as a performance, I don't know. It's just when I'm listening to her talk, I'm just like, it's Lena Headey. Good performance, but like it just doesn't resonate.
Overrides everything else.
And again,
but one of the things for me when I watch Kingsglaive, I'm like, I can set that aside. I can be like, oh, this is how Luna Freya talks, and then she's got a completely different voice actress in the game, and I'm like, hang on, I need
I just think that I'm listening to Lena Headey, and I'm thinking Lena Headey, obviously, like the Game of Thrones link is probably why they're in it. Sean Bean and Lena Headey is Cersei Lannister. Cersei Lannister's playing a
really nice person this time.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like because Lena Headey plays some nice characters in other films. Parole Officer is another film Lena Headey's in. If you've ever watched that with Steve Coogan, good film.
I'm afraid no.
Classic British comedy, brilliant film. And of course, loads of other roles where she plays protagonists, whatever. But yeah, I just couldn't distinguish between Luna Freya and Cersei Lannister because the way she's speaking, it was like, oh god, I just like.
No, she's very what's the word? Distinct. She's very distinct.
Very much so. And it's not a complaint against Lena Headey, but it's just like I couldn't. It didn't work for me. And I think the fact that I know that Lena Headey's a lot older than the character as well, it just didn't work for me. I think Sean Bean, like I like Sean Bean in anything, and he's appeared in everything. Of course, it's another movie where he dies.
I was just about to say that.
Like it's almost like, oh, I've got to be in that. I've got to be in that movie. I die. Yeah, I was like, sort of got to be in that. Have some steak and kidney pies and be in that movie. Yeah. No, I mean, like we've slagged. I'm not going to slag them off too much because they do give performances. I just couldn't work it out. I've also written here, what the fuck is going on?
Yes, that's a big one. Now that is the Final Fantasy 15 vibe overall. Something that my friends and I have discussed at length multiple times over the last couple of years is that Kingsglaive, you might need a little bit of pen and paper time to sit down and really work out the kinks and get to grips with everything that's going on. That's fine. And exactly the same thing with Final Fantasy 15. The two don't line up very well is the thing. Part of this, you saying that Yeah, Lena Headey doesn't really fit Luna Freya. Luna Freya doesn't really fit Luna Freya is the thing. There's a pre-production image of Luna where she's technically using Stella's model from Versus 13. And this is both in the car and at a different point in time. Considering some of the stuff that is in the final game and not in this movie, like Luna is the Oracle, Luna has magical powers, Luna is like touted as being actually fairly important and has stuff that she is not fucking given in the movie whatsoever. Like,
yeah.
Luna Freya in the game and Luna Freya in the movie are two very different characters. They act differently as well. Like it's one of those things of, okay, I can ignore that, whatever. Then you have stuff like, okay, well, why is Arden here? Nyx is never important again. None of this shit is ever relevant to anything that happens in the movie, but it's set up to be really important and you should care. And then it's just like, okay, but like,
so did you finish Final Fantasy 15?
I did, yes.
Yeah, so I haven't done that yet. That's the thing. I got like 10 hours in and then stopped. Well, spoiler alert, I know that Luna Freya dies because I was searching for Luna Freya's voice actor this morning and it went, the first thing it said was Luna Freya death. I was like, well, okay, I know that happens then. And I know that I think Ramu appears at some point in this movie. A friend of mine was really into this game. And you've got the DLC and everything like that. And there's like 3 or 4 different versions of this game, isn't there? Complete or whatever.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, but wow. So I've again, I had a very similar relationship with 13 than I had with 15, and then I played it and then couldn't get into it. But I think 13, I'd rather revisit. 15, I'm like, I don't really care. But watching this movie, right? What's weird about this whole world? I don't know what it's bloody called. And this is another thing, right? I'm going off on a tangent now. One thing I will say about this movie compared to the last two we just talked about is it sets the scene better.
Yes.
So, and I refer to this as the Lord of the Rings intro, right? Of like, Fellowship of the Ring. And then there were people that had and it goes through all the different clans that have different rings. It shows the map. And then it sets the scene for what's going on. And then it throws you into the Shire. Masterful storytelling, absolutely brilliant, because it goes through all the flipping first 8 chapters or whatever of the book, sums up in a 5-minute scene. Brilliant. Does that here as well. Problem is that there's too much fucking, and this land is owned by that person and that person, and they don't show it with a map. And that's where I think you talked about, well, we won't get too into the 16 rabbit hole. That's where they fixed that with 16. And with 12, they did it really well with 12, where they show a map. Here's Rabanastra and here's Dalmasca and here's whatever that country's called. You have to visually show that. Otherwise, I have no idea whether that's a person, a country, a weapon, a flipping. I have no idea what these things are. And there's lots of these words thrown around you. I had to I was tempted to not look up some of this stuff afterwards, so I could be completely. But I had to be able to talk about this probably. Like, what's the name of the place? Is it called Insomnia?
Insomnia is the capital city. But the thing is that none of this actually really matters in the game either. Is the problem?
But they don't explain that. Like, oh, we're in Insomnia, because I think the gist is that like King Sean Bean is flipping got a ring on that's making him protect everyone with this barrier. That's not really explained very well till the end. And it's like, what's going on? Like, and it's making him look old. And it's like, okay. And it's like, I don't know. So they do, I kind of contradict myself. They set the scene really well, but then they just don't make the landing. Whereas I think Advent Children doesn't set the scene that well, but makes the landing. Spirits Within is sort of probably lukewarm in both of those aspects, middle ground. Like, it does an okay setup and then it does an okay film. Whereas like, the payoff and the climax in Advent Children is to die for. The what the fuck's going on element of it. What the fuck going on is sort of like, who am I following? What's going on here? Whereas this, it sets the scene like and gives you too much exposition straight afterwards. Like, the idea the Kingsglaive are supposed to be like the Knights Templar or the flipping King's flipping men or whatever, but it doesn't really. They're fighting there with these like suits on and masks. Like, who are they? What's going on? Like, and then what was the name of the lady? Crow. Yeah. Like like at the time, like Crow is like synonymous with Game of Thrones, where Crow is a group of people. It's like Crow is like a nickname. But I don't know. It's just like, what I had to pause it a few times thinking, what who's who? Like,
I think overall that's kind of just again a symptom of Final Fantasy 15 overall, because everything is kind of named very purposefully, I want to say, at least in the game. And you have what's his name?
So that's it. This is what it does to you.
Noctis, that's his name. Oh, there's too many fucking Final Fantasy.
This is what it does. This is what it does to you. This film is like, we should play that game at some point. We should play a Final Fantasy game, right, which is like town, person, or weapon. Let's do it and see if we can do it. I reckon we can't.
But yeah, I mean, you have characters like Prompto Argentum, which like translates literally from Latin to Quicksilver. The man's like a pistol wielder, for fuck's sakes. FF15 is it knows what it wants to do, kind of, and then it just doesn't know how to get there, so it meanders and does something different, and then the rewrite set it back even further, so the horizon is so much further away that it's trying to get to. And then for me, ultimately, Kingsglaive is a lot of fun to watch with my friends because we can just rip on it the entire time, but knowing that it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the game is kind of like, well, why should I give a shit about this now? Like, yeah, if you're going into it just watching it for the first time expecting more in the game, I'm so sorry.
Are you a Star Wars person?
I wouldn't say hardcore, but I do enjoy a Star Wars.
Have you seen Rogue One?
Yes, that was a good film.
Rogue One does what this film should do. It is that it makes the stakes in the original trilogy of Star Wars that much more real.
Yeah,
it serves the story, and it's almost universally agreed as, like, amazingly, Star Wars fans agreeing on something, that it does that very, very well. It kind of nails that. Like, you watch Rogue One and you get more context for the first movie, the first film. From what you're describing, as I've not beaten Final Fantasy 15, it's interesting to know that this doesn't do that. What I will say, though, is that it has piqued my interest a little bit in playing Final Fantasy 15.
Oh, that's a mistake.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think what this would have worked a lot better, right? I think I get I think they had all these cutscenes and they wanted to use all of them and make it into a feature film, and I think they added bits in. But this would have been a lot better as like a 10-minute short before a movie. If they'd had like something like that, where this is set in the world of that thing, it doesn't necessarily need to tie in as well, but it's a 10-minute. I've come to see Spider-Man. I mentioned him earlier, and before that movie, there's a film on before, Pikachu's Vacation before the Pokemon movie, that kind of stuff. That would have been okay, cool. I got a flavor for that. I want to go and buy the game now, which is kind of the thing, because they show off all the iconography. What's weird about this is that they getting really animated now. What's weird about this is it tells it out of the 3 movies we talked about, it tries to tell the most intimate story, but shows the most depth and breadth of world. Like, it's trying to tell the story about this ragtag band of people, but then it sort of goes off and just shows all these different kingdoms and like where am I? Like, where am I at the moment? And Audi's in the game? Like,
oh yeah.
So I get the
we had Pepsi and Sony and Spirits Within. Why the fuck not?
Well, yeah, I get the impression that, like, it feels like, I don't know if this is true, it feels like they ran out of money and they went, oh god, we need to get sponsored by Audi or something. I mean, that's really jarring about the world of Final Fantasy 15 as well. I mean, like the fact that they're matching like real world in cars and what looks like downtown London or downtown flipping New York or whatever, with then the sort of castle. It's like, it's really jarring. It's like, wow. I mean, it's a world I'd love to be in and experience. That'd be cool. But it's like, I don't know, it just feels a bit impossible. You know what I mean? Like, why would that be a thing?
Final Fantasy 15 is a fantasy based on reality.
Yeah, but it's weird. It's like like if you look at Final Fantasy 12, for example. Okay, it's got that Star Wars-esque vibe, and they're using like machines that are more scientific and futuristic and stuff like that. But it in the real world, like, architecture builds on architecture and technology builds on technology. Here, the architecture and the technology are so different, and it's like that just wouldn't happen. It's like there's no development between the two. It's almost like they've gone, we've got this natural world like ours, and let's build a pretty castle out of magic. And it's like, again, something I'd love to explore as a person, but it just doesn't feel, I don't know, it just takes away from it. It doesn't make it feel as lit. That's my opinion anyway. I'm assuming you share that opinion.
It's I very much commend the attempt for mixing something modern and then something fantastical at the same time. But it's a very hard balance to walk. And I'm not sure that 15 fully hit the mark.
Cerberus appears very briefly.
Yeah,
the dog.
Yeah, sure does.
Breathing fire. Is it supposed to be Ultros, the squid?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I thought that a big giant squid appears. I was like, oh god, he's back. Oh no.
My favorite part was when Diamond Weapon appears.
I didn't see that.
Oh, of course, that's at the second half of the movie. Okay, well, Diamond Weapon appears.
I have watched it, by the way. I think I just saw, like, looked at my phone at that point.
But yeah, no, there's multiple diamond weapons, because fuck you. At no point are the multiple diamond weapons ever mentioned in the game.
And also there's the bit
they would be.
There's the bit where Nyx is fighting, who's the flipping Dark Knight in this movie?
Oh yes, Glauca. Yes.
Yeah, they're fighting each other, and all of a sudden there's like this big robo mech behind them fighting as well. And it's like, are they controlling them or what? And then the movie turns into Power Rangers. Like, and then literally, like when he goes inside the ring world, he's talking to this night thing. He sounds like Zordon from Power Rangers. Literally the same voice. It's like, "Hi, I'm Alpha. Rita has escaped. You need to save the world." And it's like, what is going on? Like, and then there's a ring that they have to have that makes him go invisible, but doesn't. It's like, we're in Lord of the Rings world. What's going on? Does that happen in Final Fantasy 15? Is there a ring in it as well? Or oh no,
it's the same ring. If that makes you feel any better.
There is a link then. That's all right. There's a couple of we've been very all over the place with this one, which kind of synonymizes the flipping movie.
Yeah, it sure does. It really,
because there is a brutal scene, and I thought this was the coolest moment that Luna Freya has, right? Where she's like, they're following her and she's surrounded, and this guy comes up to her, he's like, "Hey, give me the ring," and he takes the ring off her, puts it on, burns to a crisp, and she grabs his hand. It looks like she's trying to save his life. She's not. She just pulls the ring off his hand, just lets him die, and it's like.
That's not the Luna Freya that you see in game.
No, but that is the coolest thing in the world. She's like, this guy's attacking her, intimidating her. He's like, "No, I'm just going to let you put the ring on and then take it off your cold corpse." Like, corpse.
I still think my absolute favorite line in the entire movie, it changes it from being like just absolute garbage to, you know what, I'm enjoying myself now. When Nyx and Luna are they're being chased by the drone mecha thingies, I guess, and then they have the quiet moment in a little office, and Nyx goes like, "So I guess that guy who put the ring on before wasn't worthy," and Luna's just like, "That was my brother." Funniest moment in the entire film. Always gets me.
He's like, again, they've got like, I think probably I started referring to him as Jamie. Have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yes.
There's a Jamie Lannister. He's the Jamie Lannister character, which is funny because Lena Headey's his sister. And he like, there's that moment like early on where he's like, "You must not leave your room," and it's like I think another thing that irked me about this thing is that, even comparing it to the rest of Final Fantasy, but let's compare it to the two movies we've just watched as well. Spirits Within, strong female character. Aki, brilliant character. Advent Children, Tifa, brilliant character. And then probably the lead female in that movie without a doubt. In this one, damsel in distress, and it's like, oh, come on, like, why? Come on, you can do better than that. I don't know. It's just a bit.
So much stuff kind of comes down to just, I want to know what the product would have been if there hadn't been so many rewrites. Like, I know that it is, at the end of the day, it is the product of just so much executive meddling and authorial changes.
Too many cooks.
Yeah, too many cooks, too much time. Everything came out underdone and burnt at the same time. And
it's like banana bread.
Yeah, the worst banana bread you've ever had. The worst thing for me, and this is something that I'll talk about more when we finally talk about Final Fantasy 15, I enjoy 15 up to a point as well, and there is a reason for that. I'll talk about that at a later time. And Kingsglaive is an extension of that. I still enjoyed my time with it. I want to enjoy it more. The fact that I can see that the potential that this has, and that it's just so missing the mark. I want to do a better job with that. I want to pick it up and I want to give it the love that it deserves. I want to give it the work that it really should have had. And I can't. I'm fed up of doing that for things.
A pretty coloring book that was colored in wrong.
Yes, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a lot of the I don't know, some of the comic book movies they did back in the day. I mean, obviously now we've got too many comic book movies, but like before the MCU came about, there was lots of things that were given a movie just for the sake of giving them a movie, and they weren't treated as well. Again, video game adaptations in general only recently have started becoming what I would say good, and I think that started with Detective Pikachu. Personally, I thought that was good little film. And then of course I've not seen The Last of Us or Fallout, but they've been received really well and they're legitimately good, kind of thing. So like I think that it feels like in a sense, obviously it seems like there's too many people thinking about this as opposed to no one really caring about it, which is a lot of this, in a way, comes to the same conclusion, doesn't it? Really, like there's too much love and too much care into, I want it this way, I want it that way, which is what this feels like. It feels like a battleground for that. It's weird that of the three movies, it is the only one that has the Final Fantasy theme in it.
Yeah.
Like randomly on someone's car radio. And they also refer to Chocobo shit as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you know exactly what kind of vibe they're going for, but because of the whole feel of the rest of it, it just doesn't it doesn't slot together very well.
I don't really care that any of the characters die in this movie either. Like that. What's her name? Crow. She dies. I'm like, okay. There was no build up of you liking each other. The way that you sold it at the beginning when you're all fighting in that weird war with whatever the fuck's going on, that there's that tension of it's like they don't like each other. Like there's no she dies. It's like, okay, cool, she's dead.
Yeah. Again, the potential is there.
Yes.
And they just could not stick the landing.
No. That ring's cool though.
It is, yeah.
Like, it makes them go, I want a ring. It just goes invisible and then has that weird shield thing come up. I didn't know of a clue what the fuck was going on when he was speaking to Zordon in the flipping Ring World, though. Or, he's like, I don't, like, he turns around and he's like, oh, I want the power. And he's like, I don't actually want it, fuck you. And it's like, okay, you can get of it then. It was like, what was he trying to learn there that he turned around and said, if I don't want it, I'll get it, or something like the end of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone or some bollocks. I don't know if I can know. You don't really need it, so you can have it. You have passed our test. And then Sean Bean starts speaking, and it's like, is he alive? Is he dead? I don't fucking know. What's going on? Like, it's just one of those, like, honestly, trying to explain the plot of this movie is think it's just own. Yeah, Ravis, which is Lena Headey's brother in this, he picks the ring up and then burns to a crisp. Is it explained why can Nyx wear it and the other guys that pick it up can't?
No,
why are they worthy?
Watch the film. That's your context. You get nothing else.
Yeah, a bit flipping weird. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a weird thing. One other thing is, well, I guess worth mentioning is that the intro sequence, when they have the cutscenes and then they have the go back to the credits thing, that's in the Bouncer and Final Fantasy VIII as well.
Oh, really?
So,
right.
Yeah,
okay.
so like in Final Fantasy VIII's overture intro, the one with the black and white bit.
Yeah.
There's and it shows pictures of the characters, and then it goes on to black background with white text. The Bouncer does the same thing, almost exactly the same thing. It shows cutscenes, and then that comes up. This does the same thing as that, which is an interesting, maybe a throwback. Don't know. It's quite an interesting
throwback to the Bouncer more than Final Fantasy at this point.
That's a really good comparison. The Bouncer makes more sense than this movie. Like the Bouncer, I played the Bouncer recently, and it's a game. I think it makes more sense than this film, personally.
A lot of things.
I think the character designs are prettier in that game as well. It's up in the air whether the voice acting's better though, isn't it? I don't know. But yeah.
So I think the only thing that I really have to add on, like from a meta angle, is again they use mocap to film this movie.
Oh yeah.
They specifically hired Western actors rather than Japanese ones because they wanted to use Western body language in an attempt to appeal to the Western audience more, which I think was a really interesting take. Like they could have shot it in-house over in Japan, and instead they got Neil Newbon to come and be the body of Nyx, which is just, I knew that name from somewhere before.
Who's that then?
That would be the voice of Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3 and also the voice of Heisenberg from Resident Evil 8.
I see.
I believe he's actually done a lot of motion capture stuff. He's been a name in the industry for a long time.
I need to get better at names of people. I'm sure I recognize the person's work.
One of the actors that did the mocap stuff made a really interesting point that because they had so many different angles filming at them from all times, so essentially they could have had any angle in the film. They could change the viewpoint, which I think is a really fascinating way of like filming this kind of stuff. But
it looks incredible.
It really, really does. He was saying that when you've got the camera up in your face, the temptation to just act like you normally act is there, but you need to remember that they're really trying to track your facial expression stuff. So they all ended up acting as if they were on the stage again and overacting, I suppose, rather than like traditional film acting, which I thought was a really interesting way of talking about it.
Oh, that is cool. Again, good performances from all the actors. It's just I think they just don't fit as well. I think Sean Bean was all right. I think the actor that plays the king in the original Final Fantasy 15 is more convincing as that character. Again, I'm not a massive love for Final Fantasy 15 anyway, so like it's not like I feel like it's been ruined. Like it's not like if Advent Children of Cloud was voiced by Alec Baldwin or something like that. Like, if they just decided to pick like the most flipping random people to play them, like just so they can be in a cool movie, like.
I think they should redub Kingsglaive with Steve Buscemi as Nyx. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, who would you pick to play the king then? Who you
Alec Baldwin, obviously.
Oh God!
I'm just going to bring back the entire Spirits Within cast.
So Luna Freya would be Ming-Na then.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate that you can see my vision now.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting take. It would be old meets new. Quite like Final Fantasy 15. There we go. They're going for the vibe they're going for.
Yeah. Full circle, everyone.
Full circle. So I think that's probably milked that cow to death. So I think just to finalize then, again, feel free not to give necessarily a rating if you don't like doing it that way. You just have some thoughts. But if you were to say review these movies out of 10, what would you give The Spirits Within out of 10?
Oh, see, out of 10 is difficult. I've been banned from giving reviews out of 10 by my friends just across the years because apparently I mark things really, really harshly.
We're in the same gang. Go for it.
Oh, let's see. I would probably give... You know what? I'm going to give Spirits Within a solid 6 out of 10, which is relatively high by my standards.
Right, okay. I would have given it a 7.
Okay, yeah.
It might be a different thing, but I'd say, like, to me, a 7's like, it's all right. It's pretty good. It's not groundbreaking, but it's good.
Okay, Advent Children.
Advent Children.
Oh, again, it kind of comes back to the heart and the brain
Yeah.
doing two different things. My heart wants to give it an 8. My brain knows I should probably give it a 5.
Down the middle then.
Yeah.
7.5.
Yeah,
I'd
that
say
sounds
this was.
right.
I say this is in terms of quality. I think yeah, 7. I think it's on a par with Advent Children. I think Advent Children is on a par with Spirits Within in terms of its overall quality and impact. What about Kingsglaive? I would say I'm agreeing with you, but 7.5 for.
I'm gonna give Kingsglaive a 5 out of
Yeah,
10.
I would say 4 or 5.
And I'm gonna mark it down by half a point because I've been made to watch that about 6 or 7
Yeah,
times in
yeah.
the
So it gets
last
worse
year.
every time you watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I'm
I reckon
taking
it's
off
a it's
point
a four
one
it's a
every
four or it's
time.
a 4 or 5. So, basically, Advent Children, Spirits Within a solid 7 out of 10 movies worth watching.
Hmm.
Kingsglaive, I wouldn't
Do it if you
recommend.
have the afternoon free, but like don't expect beauty in it.
God Almighty, yeah.
See, I think
So
the ultimate takeaway as well is that would still like to see more Final Fantasy movies, is the thing. And I don't know if that's just me being very consumerist or whatever, but like honestly, I feel like because it is a different medium, they have the opportunity to tell stories in a different way. They have the opportunity to do wildly different things, and they have done with all three of these movies. I mean, the CGI has improved exponentially
oh
every
yeah,
single time, and I just want to look at more pretty things from a franchise that I adore, really, no matter
I
how bad they are at the end
I
of the
think
day.
that would be their best compromise for Final Fantasy VIII, because there's this thing about Final Fantasy VIII getting a sequel and people being like, well, we did that to the junction system would be nigh impossible to do in the modern day, and they don't really want to do it. But I think if they were to make a sequel of sorts with Final Fantasy VIII in a movie form like this, then I think it would be
I can
worth
see
it.
that. I think the only problem is that it would take about 5 hours to disseminate all that information, and I don't know if I couldn't even. I haven't decided to sit down and watch Interstellar yet because it's 3 fucking hours long. I don't know if I could do any more time than that.
Fair point. Okay, so we're saying that the movies are interesting.
Yeah, that's the word that I'll go. Yeah, interesting is a good word for
Okay, let's wrap up there then before we keep going down the rabbit hole of Kingsglaive.
it.
Thanks to everyone for watching this episode. I am Jack Mullen. You can find me on Twitter as Jack Mullen8.
And likewise, thank you everyone for listening. I look forward to hearing your opinions. You can find me on Twitter at @adramalek.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you later.
Bye.